This is Monday, November 7th, 2022, and we're here for a City of Leawood governing body meeting. I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Dunn is present and presiding. Councilmember Phila.
Here.
Councilmember Rawlings.
Here.
Councilmember Sippel.
Here.
Councilmember Kane.
Here.
Councilmember Osman.
Here.
Councilmember Larson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrison.
Here.
And Councilmember Azeltine.
Here.
Thank you. And you had Councilmember Osman on Zoom?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you very much. The next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. As you're able, please rise and we will face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The next item is the approval of the agenda, and having no modifications to the agenda this evening, I would entertain a motion to approve as printed, please.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Sippel and second from Ms. Larson, I believe. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Citizen comments. We have 3 citizens who've signed in to speak this evening, 2 on agenda items, 9A and B, but 1 on a non-agenda item. So I will call on that individual now and the others when their item comes up, and ask you to please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and if you could keep your comments to 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. Robert Cutler.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Robert Cutler. I've been a Leawood resident for 25 years. I currently live at 3903 West 141st Street Drive, right on Mission. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you here this evening. I understand I have 5 minutes, so I promise not to violate the clock right in front of me. Appreciate that. Our city is a beautiful, very livable city due to the tireless efforts of all of you in this room, especially our city professional staff, which does an amazing job. I know that you deal with a lot of issues, sidewalk widths, pickleball, sounds, lights, the type of construction material used on buildings, rocks, and I applaud you for your attention to detail. I can't imagine how tireless it is for all of you. Unfortunately, I'm just here with one more problem and pain for you to deal with on your list of many. You're probably going to say to yourself, I can't believe this guy is being so petty, and we're going to have to put up with this gentleman's concerns. He needs to get a life. Well, I apologize for that in advance, but I promise I'm just going to ask a question, and I'm not going to ask for an answer this evening. I'm going to ask you to consider coming back with an answer to something that has bothered me for a while. Specifically, my concerns have to relate with temporary signs. According to our ordinance, apparently temporary signs can be displayed forever. I've worked with Mark Klein and Travis Torres, thank you, Torres, on this issue, and I have been amazed with their incredible response and timely engagement. Wonderful people. Our city spends a significant amount of money on beautifying our city. We have amazing art. We spend thousands of hours on development and planning. We have enforcement professionals that ensure our ordinances are upheld. And at the same time, our city is polluted with endless temporary advertising signs. You guys collect them, but we are not stopping the violations. There are signs for leaf removal, Christmas lights, drainage, mulch, anything you could ask for. In fact, I would ask you to raise your hands if you've ever seen any of those signs, but I think I already know the answer. We've all seen them. So I also want to take this opportunity to thank Travis for his work since I engaged him last year on this sign issue. Apparently, he has collected or has issued 454, or has noted 454 incidents, and he has picked up 2,845 signs. Oh my gosh. Pretty amazing, but we're playing whack-a-mole. He picks them up, and the signs keep coming. In fact, I believe in November, at your council meeting, you may have commended him for his work. I'm asking the council to engage our professionals here at the city to explore ways in which to stop the violations and violations of these ordinances. We all know the signs will continue until such time as the cost to the offender is too great and that they will stop. I believe options exist, and I think our city professionals could come up with those options, and I would appreciate if the council would ask them to do so. I also raised the same issue as it relates to commercial real estate signs. They're placed up for lease, for sale, but it's amazing they never come down. You would think that there is leasing opportunities endlessly in buildings and they never get filled up, but the truth is they do get filled up. The reality is a lease runs for a term, so theoretically if you have a 5-year lease, it will end, so the building is still for lease. So if I'm a real estate agent, I can basically say, well, of course the building's still for lease. The lease is going to run in 5 years. So we have signs, like when I lived at Parkway 133, 133rd row, where the sign for that development has been up forever. I don't think that's fair to the city, and I think we're being taken advantage of as a city that is committed to beautification, professionalism, and having values of our homes maintained. So I'm just sitting here asking if the city governing council would take the time to pursue the opportunity to explore options on this issue, and any way I can be involved to support or assist, provide any type of means that could help them in identifying options, I am more than happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cutler. I know you've been in communication with Travis Torres and Mark Klein, and we'll make sure that our city attorney is involved as well. And I'm sure they'll come back with, I know that Mr. Torres is on the agenda for November 21st, so we appreciate your advocacy, and I don't think any of us disagree. It's just a matter of procedures and processes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We go now to proclamations. We have one proclamation this evening, and that is Small Business Saturday. I'm going to read some excerpts into the record, and this proclamation has already been sent to the requester. Whereas according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 32.5 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 62% of net new jobs created since 1995, and small businesses employ 46.8% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. Whereas the City of Leawood supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. Whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore, I, Peggy Dunn, Mayor of the City of Leawood, Kansas, do hereby proclaim November 26, 2022 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Thank you. We now go to presentations and recognitions, and I'll ask our Fire Chief Colin Fitzgerald. He has some introduction of new firefighters. Chief?
Good evening.
Good
Colin
evening.
Fitzgerald, Fire Chief.
So as has become our tradition, I'm here to introduce our two newest firefighters to y'all, just so you can get to know our personnel a little better. Both of them started on September 19th, right? Yep, and so they both came in as experienced lateral firefighters, something we just started in the last year to attract more applicants. So they both have experience. They came in as firefighter 3s rather than entry-level firefighter 1s. So on your right is Adam Griffith. He comes to us with 12 years' experience from Tonganoxie Fire Department. And one of the good things about Adam is he's coming with a lot of fire investigation and fire inspection experience, something we'll put to good use as time goes on. And then on your left is Joe Reed. He's coming to us with about 3 years from Pleasant Hill Fire. And one of the cool things about him, he's already a paramedic, so we don't have to send him to school. So we were super happy for that. So it's my pleasure to introduce them both to you.
Wonderful. May I ask both of these firefighters what drew them to Leawood? Would they like to respond? If you could talk into the mic, please.
I always just wanted to be part of something a little bit bigger, so I thought this was going to be a perfect fit, and so far it's turned out to be that. So.
Is it quite a bit bigger than Tonganoxie?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful.
I think the population is about 6,000. So.
Okay, great. Well, we're delighted to have you. Thank you. And Firefighter Reed?
Echoing the same thing, being part of a bigger department and having lots of opportunities to serve this community. I've worked here in the past. Have some roots in the city a little bit, and just so many opportunities to really put what I've learned into practice and kind of expand my horizons for this wonderful city.
Well, you know you're in a very important profession for our community, so we really appreciate your service, and thank you for joining Leawood.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming tonight, too.
Just one other quick thing. We did put this on the agenda, but Engine 32 brought these guys up today, and the captain on that engine, Russ Walker, today happens to be a pretty special day for him. It's his 22-year anniversary at the fire department, but it's his 30-year anniversary with his wife. Whoa. And he's here at work, so I just wanted to mention that to y'all. He's out there standing in the back. So.
You mean he's not on a date with his wife? His 30th anniversary?
That's between him and Marcy.
That's
but
dedication, right?
He needs to leave here.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
There's still time
he
to
didn't know I
fix
was going to
this.
say that, so that's why he's probably really red. Yep, he is.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations to you on 2 occasions, important occasions.
That's how you last 30 years, is you not at home on your 30th anniversary.
Oh, boy.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we appreciate all you do. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll see you at the grocery store.
Penthouse has a lovely floral department. It's not too late.
We have no special business, so we move to consent agenda, and we have items 8A through double K. Just a few things. So would you like to pull anything for discussion? Ms. Kane?
I would not like to pull something, but I'd like to make a point of saying, these look really fancy now. So thank you for the new format, complete with attachment links. We are looking mighty fine. Thank you. Thank you
concur,
for.
it's great.
That was our city clerk and deputy clerk's work,
Yes,
so
thank you.
you.
It makes it clearer and makes it easier, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well done.
Mr. Sipple?
Not anything in particular, but there's a question here that I have. There's a number of easements that are in here that we are settling with the property owner. And my question to David is, there still unpurchased or unsettled easements on Mission Road that we are working on?
To David Lay? You're
Yes, ma'am.
asking him to come in and respond to this.
Well, we can go on and he can come in later, because it's sort of a general question with regard to this.
Here he comes.
Oh, yeah, he's doing a staff report later.
Well, here he comes now.
Here he is.
Did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. Mission Road on the power lines?
Well, no, we're purchasing a number of easements from the property owners so we can do the construction in there. The question is, are there some holdouts, some people that haven't settled with the city?
Yeah, this is on the Mission Road 85th to 92nd project, and there are 3 property owners that we're still in discussions with, but it's to underground the power lines, and so we are also working with Evergy to have them redesign their plans to avoid those easements.
So we're going to avoid the easements rather than try to up the price to settle.
Correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Phila, did you have something to pull?
Oh, yes, I do. D and E.
D and E. Anything else anyone want to pull? Anything? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda, please.
Second?
Motion from Mr. Rollins, second from Ms. Phila. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. 8D is accept the minutes of the March 24th, 2022 Sustainability Advisory Committee. Ms. Phila.
Thank you. First of all, it's lovely to catch up with the Sustainability Award or Sustainability Committee with all the minutes. This one is really related to the tree update. It was a question I had on a broader. We were talking about having an ordinance for construction protection of our trees, and I just wanted to ask the staff where that was in process.
I thought we had a work session on that, and I thought it...
Yeah, I know, and I think I'm kind of
Is
wondering.
Mr. Klein the point person for that? Oh, I think, yes, because Brian Anderson was in the work
Brian
session.
and Dustin both weighed in on it.
Right.
And I would have to check and see where it was left between all of us, and I can let you know and give you an update.
Because
it
it was
can come
timely to
back.
read this, because I've had a couple neighbors ask me about where this was, so I'd like to be able to answer them. Thank you for that, and move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve the minutes for March 24th, and a second from Mr. Hazeltine. Any other discussion? Ms. Larson?
Just a general comment that the Sustainability Advisory Committee minutes have important information that I think we're all interested in, and we kind of did have a backlog here dating back to January the 28th, and so I'm just hopeful that we'll get those minutes closer to the time that they occur.
Your chairman is sitting right next to you, Councilmember Sippel, so maybe he can give you some insight.
It's a function of the backlog in the Parks Department. They've had some turnover in there. They're recruiting new people, and musical chairs has probably caused the backlog, but we'll try to do better.
Well, not critical of the chair, just saying they're doing important work that we should all know about, and we want to know about.
Ms. Fella?
So actually, the thing I mentioned was like in the next committee report, so that one's already taken care of. But I was just going to ask if it might be the tree committee, because they were talking about how they have written articles and updates to the website over the last 6 months, and just thought it might be great if we gave them an audience to come and share with the council what they've done with the website and help.
You're talking about the tree committee?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the chair is right down here at this
Right,
end.
yeah.
Councilmember Harrison.
So I was just thinking that would give them some, I mean, I would love to see it. I mean, I could go out and do it on my own, but I was thinking it might be a nice, like, if they'd be willing and interested in coming in and share with them what they've done. And I thought it would be great. I can look into that. Thank you. So I've already moved to approve this one.
We've got a question, though, first.
No, I was just going to say to Councilwoman Larson's point, I wonder, I don't know how much work this would be for the staff, but I wonder about posting draft minutes on the site somewhere, like maybe on the Parks and Rec site before they're approved, and just, you know, having a disclaimer there saying, you know, these are not official, these are draft minutes. I don't know if that would even be advisable from a, from your standpoint, Patty, but that's
I
just an
have a
idea.
feeling when there are draft minutes available,
They come
we're
to us.
seeing them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's a matter of
getting-
even getting the draft
Oh,
due
okay.
to.
They're
It isn't
transposing
like
from-
drafters sitting around
Oh,
for.
so once it's drafted, it comes. I mean, once
I've
the
seen
final.
them stamp draft when they come to us even. So if the group hasn't met to approve them, I've seen some that have come to us with draft on them.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah.
That's kind of what brought it to mind. I don't know what the mechanics are of it, but
No, I think it's probably what Councilmember Sippel said. They have had a lot of turnover.
But if they're prepared well in advance of when we approve them, then that might be an opportunity, and then maybe shoot out an email to the council or whoever. So anyways, just an idea. Spitballing here.
Thank you. Ms. Phila, did you have something else on this?
No, I can
On
make a motion.
November, on this one?
I can make a motion for the next one too, so.
The
we've
June
already-
30th, though? Did you have? I think we've approved the March 24th. June 30th is what we're on now.
Have we?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then the one for June 30th, you can prove as well, because that was the one about the ordinance for construction. And I got them confused into which report.
Second.
So it's,
All right, motion from Ms. Phillips, second from Mr. Asseltine. And to clarify, you're saying that it has already been taken care of, the ordinance on construction and tree
Patty said she
preservation?
was going to check in to see who's on first and who's on second. Thank you. And because I've had, and what I really meant to do on the first one was ask about the website. So I'm sorry for that confusion. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I'm just delighted that you're going to have an SAB meeting in the spring. So, great.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve these minutes. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right, it's approved unanimously. Thank you. And that concludes the consent agenda. Thank you. And going now to 9A. Committee recommendations. This is a resolution approving and authorizing the mayor to execute a development agreement between the City of Leawood and Odo Development Company, Inc., pertaining to the funding of the potential installation of traffic calming measures north of the East Village development, contingent upon approval of case number 85-22. In the staff comment on this agreement sets forth the details for the developer's contribution of funds for traffic calming improvements north of the development, and staff estimates that the improvements can be completed for $30,000, and this agreement reflects the developer's agreement to escrow that amount for these purposes. Ms. Bennett, would you like to begin, since your name is on the agreement?
Sure, absolutely. This item comes to you as a development agreement between the Odo Development Company and the city, and it talks about the traffic calming measures off-site that we talked a little bit about in January on 132nd Street and High Drive. There has been, with staff and with others, some discussion over whether the developer committed $200,000 carte blanche or not. The developer comments during the meeting were, or his attorney's comments were, that the money would be fronted and reimbursed. That was not the understanding of staff. However, there was no stipulation and there was no agreement between the parties. The developer's point being that the traffic study did not show additional traffic onto these side streets, and that one of the streets, I believe it's High Drive or Chadwick, was moved in such a way that it would be difficult for people they would have to go east to come west. So it would avoid some of the cross-through traffic, and Mr. Lay, I think, has a map that can show you some of that. However, that being said, knowing that when you put apartments on a site with a number of people, the developer did contribute $30,000 towards traffic calming measures. The $200,000, when we talked with Mr. Lay, was not a scientific number. It was not an estimate of what it would cost. It was just a number. The $30,000 is what the Director of Public Works thinks it will take for traffic calming measures. These include speed tables, or they could be other items, depending on what the Public Works Committee and the residents and the staff come up with, which will probably take several meetings and will ultimately come back to you for approval. We talk about speed tables because that's kind of where this started out, but there are other items that the Public Works Committee could consider. And Mr. Lay is confident the $30,000 can cover that. I know there has been some concern about asphalt because the word asphalt is in here. If ultimately the decision and the recommendation is concrete, Mr. Lay believes that the $30,000 could cover the concrete as well. It would use city staff, both the asphalt and the concrete. Right now, Mr. Lay is short on a concrete crew, but hopefully by the time these things would go in the next 12 to 24 months, he will be fully staffed and would be able to do it. So if that is a concern, this agreement is not here to have you guys decide what types of traffic calming should be there. More information needs to be had and recommendations from the Public Works Committee. The amount is there because that is what Mr. Lay said would handle it versus the $200,000, which was not tied to any specific improvements. In any event, this is why the development agreement is here. It is related to the Planning Commission recommendation you're going to see shortly, in that the stipulation number 4 leaves it up to the council to determine the amount that should be contributed towards traffic calming by the developer, and this covers that.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett, for that. Are there questions for Ms. Bennett? Mr. Sipple?
The $30,000 is a far cry from $200,000, and I understand that. I was under the impression that we were going to do a test or sampling first of the traffic on High Drive and 132nd Street at some point in the future, probably after the development is up and a number of dwelling units are there. Then we do the test, maybe after there's 50 or 100 or something, and that never was defined to me. I don't know what the start date of the test was going to be. That maybe Scott had an idea what he was going to do, or maybe David does, but I don't know when that test is going to take place. It's the test, and then the final, the test would be at the city's expense. And then the final, the speed bumps, how many ever we come up with, the $30,000 would pay for the permanent speed bumps. So do you have any ideas as to the timing of this? Are we looking at 2024 or 25 or?
Well, if this project were to move forward and get approved, I believe the developer has 10 days after approval of that project to submit the $30,000. So it's within, so at that point, we could start the Public Works Committee meetings, and as Patty said, it's probably going to take at least 3 meetings to get through what the residents want that live on that street, what they want to have as far as, is it speed tables, whatever it could be. And then the city would purchase those speed tables, and if it's, trying to pinch the road down or anything like that, we would buy the tubular markers, and then Public Works would work with the residents and the maintenance staff, and we'd put those, at city's expense, put those out for, maybe this next summer through the fall, and see how they function. We can go out and do speed tests and see what the speed and volume are. And if the residents want to proceed forward, we would probably want to get another petition signed saying they do like these and they do want the permanent ones installed. And then we would take those down because we don't want to keep those out over winter, just because the snow plows, they're just nailed down. So we'd pull those out, and then the following year we would do the permanent installation.
Based on the distance from 133rd Street, High Drive, to 132nd over to Mission Road, what would you envision the number of speed tables to be?
Well, I put in the estimate to have 12. That's spaced out.
Wow, that's going to be a washboard.
Yeah, it's about every little under 400 feet. So there's quite a few of them in there. But we would, like I said, have to meet with all the residents to see what it is they want, how often, if there's just certain areas that we need to address. And so we would take that all into account.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lay. Mr. Azultine and Ms. Phillip.
Thank you, Mayor. So David, this would be based on the traffic control needed now, not after the development is put in place, correct?
Correct. Well, to control the speed and volume, typically, when you place these, every so often you control the speeds by doing that. And then volume, it's just if people are using it for a cut-through street, then it's just, people typically try to avoid those types of streets.
Right, because I just think it's developer, as I understand, is playing nice here on this because this would not necessarily be necessitated by anything that hasn't happened up to this point, development-wise, so. But, yeah, thank you.
Ms. Phillip.
I just wanted to make sure that I understand correctly that we cannot require a developer to be doing these kinds of improvements that can't reflect anything that has been their development, but that is a goodwill effort on the developer's part as part of this total approval for the increased population that will be out and the anticipation that it might even grow more. But right now, we're just working on what is, not what's going to be. And it is not required for the developer or the city to do this until you've met the proper CLIP levels of, need and petitions and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to validate that's my understanding, or maybe it's been said better by Patty.
Yes, that is pretty well said. The traffic study that's out there and the traffic engineers in our public works report do not contain concerns about these side streets. So normally the city wouldn't address them, but the residents did come forward. They came forward to the developer and they came forward to you all and they came forward to staff. And ultimately this ended up being the resolution, and it is a goodwill gesture by the developer.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the work Patty did in putting that all together, as well as you, David Lade. So we have specificity about what we're looking at and what we hope to achieve.
Ms. Kane, Ms. Harrison.
While I understand and appreciate the comments that have been made, I spoke to David Lay about this at length today, as well as Mark Klein about this at length. And I take exception with this and how it happened and what is happening. I understand that your language to it's not required. I understand that language. But I also understand exactly what Patty said earlier and what's in our packet, that it was everybody's understanding that the developer agreed to fund traffic calming improvements for 132nd and High Drive area in amount not to exceed $200,000. Initially, this was going to be a letter of intent. It wasn't money put into escrow. But nonetheless, I think it's been said tonight, and I think everybody agrees that that was the intent, and everybody agreed to it. And that was a reflection of the, in my tenure on 15 years on here, this was the most contested application I've had to sit through. There have been others highly contested, but this certainly is the biggest one I've ever had. So again, in using words like good faith, I do believe at the time when the 12 meetings that we've gone through between planning and city council on this development item, this was indeed what was the decision, or was the agreement. The only thing at what ultimately happened, and we've got copies of emails of Mr. Lambers, who unfortunately isn't here to verify, saying this is what's going to happen, this is when this is brought up as at final, which is where we are. And then here comes, will that 200, not that there was a $200,000 agreement, but will it be refunded? That's the effort, or the issue that came up. So not that there was 200,000 letter of intent, but would it be refunded? So that's where the disagreement started, and Mr. Lambers is not here, so unfortunately part of this will never be known for sure. But this is why I take issue with this, is to go from the 200, which is what the residents were understanding as a good faith effort on behalf of the developer. That's indeed what it was. how did we, 1, 2, 3, with no input from residents, go from 200,000 to 30,000? I respect staff, I respect the number. It's just, in my mind, the optics and the procedure, our very own procedure, is being violated here. And so I do take exception with it. I don't think that with $30,000 and the passage of time, because again, I understand what you're saying about we can't make a developer do certain things based upon traffic that's coming in the future unless the developer agrees to it. And the developer did agree to it. The thing that they didn't agree to, what I thought, I should speak for myself, I even questioned it out loud, and it's in the minutes. I said, why would we pay back? That is just one of the concessions the developer's doing in the intent of being a good neighbor. I questioned it my very own self out from my very own mouth. So I don't like this at all. I don't think that this is an acceptable solution at this time without further whatever on all parts involved, because this to go from 200 possibility letter of intent, not asking him to put $200,000 in the bank, to all of a sudden 30,000. Yes, I'm going to pay 30,000. Oh no, I'm not. If you read the materials, oh okay, I will. I don't think that's acting in good faith. I don't think that's a good faith effort in my opinion. Thank you.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. I would like to second much of what Councilwoman Kane just said. I'm frustrated by this misunderstanding or miscommunication, whatever it might have actually been. And I'm sorry that now I feel like it has created some mistrust with our residents and my neighbors who brought a petition. They thought they followed the steps that they needed to follow based on what they read from our staff. And yes, I've reread the emails and circling through, I think I just keep getting more confused. But it is what it is, and I understand that we cannot impress upon the developer to fix a problem they did not create. But I would like for us to give serious consideration to less invasive ways that we might calm the traffic, whether that is flashing speed limit signs along 132nd and High. I am worried that traffic tables will just cause people to cut through Leawood South to get out onto State Line, where they might go faster on Sagamore. Again, this is my neighborhood, and I use these streets 6 to 12 times a day to get in and out of my neighborhood, so I'm quite familiar with the options to how to get out of Waterford and Walsher Place to get to Mission Road or to get to State Line. And I appreciate that we've put hours into this, and our staff has done an impeccable job with giving them numbers and giving them data and tracking cars and tracking speeders. It's a frustrating situation because there are a lot of children in this neighborhood on scooters, on bikes, joggers, walkers, people who walk 3 abreast on the street with their dogs, and it is a concern. So I share your frustrations. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Phillip.
I hear what my fellow council members are saying. I think the only thing here is that we have specificity by people who are skilled in what would it actually take in terms of dollars. The intent to deal with the traffic issue is being solved, but I don't know what the expectation is that the extra $170,000 is that if it were garnered, what was it going to be for when we have our professional staff saying that they can do whatever, probably the maximum solution, which is hard, hard concrete, for 12 stops. Why we would ask them to be putting $200,000 when the fact of the matter is we didn't know what the cost might be for that. And I trust David Lay's estimate of $30,000 to be able to do the job for the traffic study and the implementation of that. So I don't think there's anything to distrust about the intent of what we're doing or what the city's willing to do. It's just that we didn't have the right number about what it would take to do. What would you expect?
We have 2 more council members with hands up, but I do intend to call the developer in to speak, and you'll have opportunity to make comments to him as well. So if you have a question, Mr. Hazeltine, did you want to speak now or wait till we have the developer in front of us?
Well, I was just going to kind of tag on to Deborah's comments, in that when the debate was going on, I heard that 200,000. I'm like, well, someone must have researched that, and surely that's a good number, and apparently it's just kind of a number they pulled out of the air. And so it was somewhat arbitrary, but I would say, even though our professionals are telling us they're confident it would just take $30,000, that if there is a difference on the upside, that I would hope the governing body, the Public Works Committee and the staff and the governing body would work together to make sure that that's not a sticking point. So,
Ms. Larson?
I want to echo the comments of Council Members Kane and Harrison. I was really disappointed when this issue came to light, because clearly from the meeting, it was my understanding that it was a $200,000 commitment. I know there was some confusion about the letter of credit, but that number stuck in all of our heads, and I feel like we have let the residents down in not finding the clear path and locking this in for their neighborhood. The optics and procedure are less than ideal. And I'm concerned about the $30,000 number because, when I look at the traffic calming policy on page 11, there's lots of different options. And having 12 speed tables sounds not good, in my opinion. I would be disappointed to have that in my neighborhood. And there are other options that we can do for traffic calming, and those might cost more money. And so I do want to chime in that if the residents are wanting something different than the speed tables and something that costs the $30,000, that the governing body would entertain the notion of helping resolve this issue. It's a terrible misunderstanding, and it's disappointing on several different levels. So those are my thoughts. And my last comment is that whatever is decided, we need to ensure that the residents have an adequate say and we communicate with them. I was happy to hear David Lay say that they would be part of the process in the Public Works Committee meetings, because that is critically important. And I feel like this change kind of blindsided them. It certainly blindsided me. And so I hope that we can find a path forward that is more amicable.
Ms. Phillip?
I just wondered if we could ask David Lay to again kind of look at the cost estimate that's been put forward of $30,000, because my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, is that of all the traffic calming procedures that he knows about, putting in 12 concrete speed bumps would be the maximum cost. There's other things that can be done, or not all of them or some of them, but he gave an estimate based on the most expensive solution to escrow. So I don't know, if we gave them $200,000, what would you do with another $170,000 to address this issue?
Well, that would be to hire a contractor. So if we do this in-house, there's not a lot of material cost, because there's just not a lot of material you're putting down. It really goes into labor and equipment. And since we're providing that to do this work, that's where most of the cost is going to be at. So we've looked at it. If they want to, because we looked at other options, you could pinch point portions of the street to try to help slow traffic down, but you don't have a speed table, but you just narrow it up to 20 feet or so. And then if you do that with islands, it's just a very short island, so we're not we're looking at about 40 feet of curb or so, and that's, our staff can do that. And then we just put brick pavers in the island. It's going to be probably 6 feet wide. I mean, those are some other options that we would be looking at, or if you wanted to do a radar feedback sign, those are about $7,000 a piece.
And I just, having gone through this at 85th Terrace with an understanding, the intent was to make sure that putting in the temporaries would allow those neighbors, because the people who are going to go over the bumps and the tables are those residents. And so they have an opportunity to understand, do they really want to live with that, going over it 3 and 4 times a day? And that was a big factor when we were doing 85th Terrace between Lee and State Line Boulevard. And so the fact that the costing is based on the reality of what can be done if you want to put in the maximum kind of infrastructure and let the citizens decide and experience, I thought was a really positive, and I'm feeling comfortable of putting together this agreement. I don't know where the other $170,000 is supposed to be spent. Do we know that? Well, why do you keep thinking $200,000 is the number?
Mr. Sippel?
Just what Ms. Fella said is 85th Terrace, do you know what the cost of that improvement? I think there's 3 speed tables on 85th Terrace.
There are 3 raised intersections. I don't recall right offhand, but in order for those to work, we ended up doing a lot of storm sewer work involved with that, because they went through the curbs, and so we had to put storm sewers upstream, so it was an extremely costly project. But that was also done along with almost a street reconstruction. We tore the curbs out, we tore out most of the pavement, or quite a bit of the pavement, and so it made sense at that point. While we're out there, it was our first one that we constructed. We wanted to make sure that everything was set just right, so we did it all in concrete, but there's some things that we've learned in talking with the maintenance staff. They honestly prefer to do it in asphalt and have this opportunity.
And it doesn't sound like that situation is comparable to this one.
Excuse me?
It doesn't sound like that situation up north is comparable to this.
I mean, if we want to do concrete, we're going to have to excavate an extra 6 inches of asphalt out over the entire width of the roadway to put these speed tables in, but there's nothing wrong with that asphalt. So by trying to maintain, and the other issue is, we've had this traffic calming policy for 20 years, and we have traffic calming on one street. And part of it could be due to the cost of the installation of these devices. So if we can find unique ways to build these where they're more cost effective, it may help with installation on other streets. So that's another reason why we want to look at this. But one other comment here is the advantage of doing the temporary installs is we'll be able to go out and monitor those streets, Sagamore, that are parallel or within the neighborhood. We can do a pre and post install of these temporary traffic control devices, so we know ahead of time, are we changing the traffic flow on those streets? And so if that becomes an issue, then we can look at either modifying those temporaries, or if we're not impacting those streets, then we can just go forward with the install on the permanent.
Well, that's why we so appreciate your involvement and the Public Works Committee involvement, working with the residents. I hope that's heard loud and clear. I read that in your memos in advance of this meeting. The residents will be involved. They were always going to be involved. So the emails we received that said, how dare you do this without our input, that was never the intention. So they will be involved, and we've heard the price tag is sufficient. I am going to bring the developer in just a moment, but thank you, Mr. Lay. Mr. Rawlings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking at this like the 200,000 versus 30,000. I think of a dartboard. Back when we discussed this back in January, we were throwing a dart at the board, not knowing what number was going to land on, and somehow it landed on 200,000. But it's not written in stone. Now we have the dartboard, and a dart has been thrown by the Public Works Director. We hit the number 30,000. I'm very comfortable with that number. I don't feel that we're disadvantaging the residents in that area. The 30,000 will achieve the goal that we're trying to do on traffic calming. Having said that, there's disagreement on that. And so do we vote on the 30,000 and move forward, or can we delay this and have the Public Works Director come back with alternatives so we can all have a better understanding of what other type of traffic calming issues or, I guess, procedures that may or may not be workable. And if that doesn't work, that's fine.
Well, this is an agreement with the developer. The traffic calming measures themselves would come back to you after being studied by, working with the residents, the Public Works Committee, and Mr. Lay. So we don't, at this point, the tables, yes, they've been discussed and they are in this agreement, but this agreement also allows for alternative measures, which would include the ones that Ms. Larson referred to, and maybe others, studying them and the costs.
So the agreement would take care of that.
The agreement would be for $30,000, and it would take care of the $30,000 worth of whatever the alternative measures
Then
would
we
be,
would
and
work-
Mr. Lay feels pretty confident it would cover what would be necessary.
Speed tables or any other alternatives possibly.
Pinching the street down, the speed tables, the, I forget what he called them, the feedback signs, the speed limit feedback signs.
Thank you.
Ms. Kane?
To answer your question, the $200,000 that was, and I don't disagree. I'm not arguing about how that $200,000 came out, but nonetheless, the developer agreed initially to the $200,000. That was everybody's understanding. So I don't also disagree that for $30,000, our city staff with no outside consultant could nail down 15 temporary speed bumps along High Drive. I don't doubt that. And then I don't doubt that those could be replaced with asphalt and provide an option that we could pay for if we don't hire an outside consultant and if we do it all in-house. But what I do doubt, because there's nothing anywhere near that kind of a measure in our city, let alone any other city that I can think of. Where? Anybody tell me, where is there 15 speed tables in that length of time anywhere in our metro? Can it be done? I don't doubt that it can be done for $30,000. Is that the best option? Is that taking the time to do the interaction? And again, was this not even approved or even accepted by the developer? Was this not a good faith motion to waylay some of the consternation of the neighbors? Okay, so maybe 200 isn't the number, but 30 is really giving me heartburn. Maybe we come up with something in between and we allow the time, we allow the efforts, we allow the input from the residents, and we come up with some middle ground here. But thank you.
All right, are you ready for me to bring in the developer? Yes. Since this is an agreement with him. Okay, so I'd like to call forward, and I don't know if it's Mr. Odo or Mr. Holland, but if you could come forward, please, and be heard. And we do have one citizen who signed in to speak on this specific issue as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Curtis Holland, attorney for the developer. For the record, my address is 900 West 48th Place, Suite 900, Kansas City, Missouri 64112. Thank you for allowing us to speak a few minutes on this item. I've heard all the commentary. Would like to make just a few comments and try to address some of the things that were said. Would like to thank staff for working with us. I worked through the agreement with Patty pretty extensively, and obviously worked with my client on this issue. And wanted to say that I'm very appreciative of the comments that were made here tonight. I would say, and I'm sorry, there was a misunderstanding or is a misunderstanding still. The issue about the $200,000, yeah, it was just a number that was thrown out. It wasn't pegged to anything. There was a discussion about it potentially being used for speed tables, but no one knew at the time what that might cost. There was no agreement by my client that he would pay $200,000 to the city, just carte blanche, and let the city do whatever they want with it. There was always an understanding on his part that if there was any kind of a payment up front made, that would be reimbursed back to him. And all of that really was based on the city's policy that's in place today. There's a traffic calming policy in place today. And I know you're familiar with it. And really the responsible parties under that policy for payment of these kinds of traffic calming measures is the residents themselves, not a developer, and certainly not in this case where the developer isn't responsible for any of the existing issues or perceived as existing issues. As was stated earlier, our traffic reports don't indicate that there's going to be a lot of traffic generated by this project now or in the future that would utilize these streets. I know that the city has been looking at this particular issue, this particular street, since I think 2014, maybe 2009, and had discussions. So there's been a long-standing issue, or at least perception that there was an issue with cut-through traffic on this street, and there were residents that have had long concerns for that. But you know, we're here to try to. We're not changing. Let me just say that we're not changing anything about what was previously discussed and what the residents wanted in terms of a study and an evaluation of what the traffic calming measures should be. The idea that there would be these temporary measures, and I think we're talking about speed bumps or bumps, some sort of bumps, installed in the roadway. To allow the residents time to see if that's something that they liked. And if they did, maybe have those installed on a permanent basis. I'm not sure 12 is the correct number. Probably wouldn't like that on my street if I was living on a street. I know that there's some comments from the residents in their emails which would indicate, hey, maybe that's not something that they would like to see done as well. And maybe there are other traffic calming measures that could be studied and evaluated. We're not here to change any of that. We're not taking anything away from the residents. There's still going to be these Public Works Committee meetings and an evaluation of what would be done. I think what we're doing here tonight is to try to put some closure to the contribution from the developer that I think it was recognized that they're maybe not legally obligated to do, but is willing to put forth to help, provide some financing for whatever measures are ultimately approved by the Public Works Committee, the council, the residents, and so forth. And again, I'm sorry, or we're sorry, if there's some misunderstanding about the $200,000. I think what's important really is that the money is there to help fund these improvements. And whatever that amount ends up being, actually our estimates are less than $30,000, but we're willing to do that as we've indicated, and so that's where we are with it, but appreciate your time. And happy to answer any questions if you have anything.
There may be questions. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Questions for Mr. Holland from any of you? I guess they spoke before you came in, so they're they have nothing to say.
And we're happy to come back to address any of these issues with you if the residents want us to address anything as well. We're happy to do that.
All right. Before you depart, we do have a resident who signed in to speak, so we'll have her come forward at this point. Thank you. Rachel Rubin. Oh, Mr. Lay.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing. I've heard a couple people mention speed bumps, but they are not speed bumps. They're speed tables. So they're about 15 feet in length, a flat top, and they have 6-foot ramps that go up to them. So they're not just these speed, this asphalt speed bump that's placed out there. They take a while to construct, and they are more permanent looking. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much. Ms.
Quick
Larson?
question while Mr. Lay is at the podium. Is there a way to do a temporary, the mid-block islands, the splitter islands, or the road narrowing? Is there a way to mimic those traffic calming methods?
So what we would do on that is purchase their collapsible ballards. So they're just plastic. You'll see them sometimes on the interstate when they divide the highway. And we'll just go out and you drill those into the pavement to kind of mimic where that curb is. So they stand up. I think they're 30 inches in height, so they stand up. And so you're forced to drive where the curb would be.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Sippel, did you have another question? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lay. Ms. Rubin, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, hello, good evening. I'm Rachel Rubin. I live at 3105 West 132nd Street.
Thank you.
Yes. So obviously, we are extremely disappointed that this development agreement was put into place without any discussion with the residents. The petitioners, we had 61 houses, which is 84% of the residents on 132nd and High Drive. 84% of those residents signed an original petition for a traffic calming study, and those were submitted to the city February 18th, 2022. I need to go back a little bit in time to talk about the progression of the $200,000. It's not a letter of intent, it's a letter of credit. And I want to first go back to Mark Klein. Well, let me back step a little bit. The petitioners, we followed every instruction, every single instruction that was given to us by City Manager Scott Lambers, by the Director of Public Works, David Lay, and by Mark Klein. Every single thing they told us to do, we did, and it took a lot of effort, actually. We had to get original signatures from over 75% of the residents. What they told us, what the city staff told us repeatedly, was that a $200,000 letter of credit for traffic calming measures on 132nd and High Drive was a stipulation of the final plan for Cameron's Court. And I'm going to go through the written representations I have from all of these people over the past, 11 months that confirm that a $200,000 letter of credit was agreed to by the developer, and that was the city's understanding of what was promised to the petitioners. So December 30th, Mark Klein wrote a memo, which I know you all received. It was in preparation for the January 3rd City Council meeting. That's where the developer wanted approval for rezoning. Nothing else could move forward until he had that approval for rezoning. The memo stated, the developer of Cameron's Court has agreed to provide the city of Leawood with a 5-year, $200,000 letter of credit for the installation of traffic calming devices on adjoining residential streets. If the residents of the subdivision surrounding Cameron's Court development file a petition with the City of Leawood Public Works Committee that meets the required threshold of 51 residents to sign the petition for traffic calming, the city will install temporary traffic calming devices. And then it goes on to say that they'll make the traffic calming devices permanent if we like them. The city will have permanent improvements installed at the cost of the developer. Again, at the very beginning, a 5-year, $200,000 letter of credit. That memo was by, again, Mark Klein to the mayor, the city council, Scott Lambers, and David Lay. Then my neighbor, Kathy Kelly, had quite a few discussions with David Lay after the rezoning approval. And on January 7th, there was a written discussion between Ms. Kelly and David Lay. And Kathy Kelly went over some questions, and she received answers from David Lay. Ms. Kelly says, because this case is a unique situation due to the developer's bond, if the $200,000 covers the cost of traffic calming, how could we communicate that to the residents before they sign the petition? This is David Lay's answer. The process needs to be made clear to the residents. There is no commitment on the residents for the cost of the studies on this first petition. The first petition is to provide staff and the Public Works Committee information that there is support to study the street and determine what traffic calming devices could be installed, review the issues and concerns about redirecting traffic, develop a preliminary plan that shows potential solutions, and develop a cost estimate. Okay? Then he says, after we have determined what is to be installed and where it is to be installed, staff will estimate the cost for installation. We're not there yet. I mean, we're getting this $30,000 number, but we're not there yet in the process. There's been no study. There's been no outside engineer that's come in to do the study that's required in the traffic calming policy. And then he says, the funding is up to the governing body, but there is a commitment of $200,000 from ODO if he proceeds with this project. Then continuing, we have January 24th, Scott Lamberts wrote to me, Rachel, I wanted to follow up to make sure that you knew that the traffic calming stipulation will be a condition of the approved final plan and no action will occur until that happens. March 29th, 2022, David Lay writes, as has been stated, the city administrator will allow for the traffic calming petitions to move forward with less than 30 points, but only after the city receives the $200,000 letter of credit from Cameron's Court Development after the final plan has been approved. April 6th, Mark Klein is responding to a question posed by Kathy Kelly, and Scott asked Mark Klein to respond. Scott copied the mayor, the city council, the city committees, and others. The developer agreed to provide the city of Leawood with a 5-year, $200,000 letter of credit for the installation of traffic calming devices on adjoining residential streets as part of the preliminary plan process. This stipulation will be included with the final plan of the development. I also want to go back on Mr. Lay.
Ms. Rubin, let me ask the council if they're willing to listen, because you've been way over the 5-minute. Are you all willing to let her continue?
Yes.
All right, please continue.
Thank you very much. This is really, hold on, I'm sorry, I lost my spot. I'm sorry, give me 1 second, please. Okay, well, I'm sorry about that. I can't find what I was looking for. You know, we have, again, 84% of the residents on this street signed the petitions in good faith. I mean, we did whatever the city told us to do. We got original signatures, everything, and it was based on the $200,000 letter of credit. And I also want to point to, Ms. Larson, what you talked about with some different options. The traffic calming policy, first of all, it requires hiring an engineer, a traffic engineer, to come up with options. I mean, I don't know where Mr. Lay, he's now saying the speed tables that's the solution. That may not be the solution. And the policy talks about roundabouts, semi-diverter, mid-block islands, splitter islands, roadway narrowing, forced turn islands, chicanes, and speed tables and race intersections are 2 options on that list as well. So 30,000, again, from 200,000, that was what was repeated over and over and over. That was what was presented to you for the rezoning on January 3rd, 2022. And that was a part of the deal. It was a concession that the developer made because there was so much opposition to this project. We did not want Cameron's Court to be approved. There was 1,700 people who signed a protest, an opposition petition to say, please don't approve Cameron's Court. So as a concession, the developer said, okay, I agree, I will provide a $200,000 letter of credit. We need a traffic engineer to come and say what the costs are going to be and what is best for the street. You know, we don't know in advance what is best for the street. That is something a traffic engineer would come and do. I'm sorry, let me see if I can find. I have a quote, I cannot seem to find it on this fly here, but Mr. Lay says that there was, and I'll send this email later if you want me to, but he said that there was confusion at the meeting regarding whether there was going to be reimbursement for the $200,000 letter of credit. And Mr. Lay says specifically that is not the case. There's not going to be a refund for that. And I'm trying to find, I'm just a little nervous up here, and I'm trying to find my spot. Okay, so let's see. My understanding is that the city, this is from a question from Kathy Kelly again to Mr. Lay. My understanding is that the city can draw on the developer's $200,000 anytime between now and 5 years from now, and that the city will not have to reimburse the developer the money, i.e. the developer is paying. Is that correct? That was a question Kathy Kelly posed to Mr. Lay. Mr. Lay's answer on January 7th of this year was, once the letter of credit is submitted, which could take a year or more, depending on how long it takes the developer to complete the items above, it will be good for 5 years. There was confusion about the developer being reimbursed by the city. That is not the case. The city will have 5 years from the time the letter of credit is submitted to Leawood to draw on that letter of credit. If we don't receive a petition, or if we go through the traffic calming process and the residents end up not wanting traffic calming after 5 years, the city will end the letter of credit. What traffic calming measures are being contemplated? This is Kathy again. What traffic calming measures are being contemplated for High Drive and 132nd Street? Mr. Lay's response, this will be determined by the Public Works Committee meetings through discussions with the residents abutting High Drive and 132nd Street on what they want and what they don't want. Not everyone is going to agree, but we will need a majority on the measures. What I'm saying is if you're limiting, after all of this, the $200,000 letter of credit was to be a stipulation, and that was what the developer agreed to. If the city now is saying, oh, no, I don't know where we came up with $200,000. We have all these emails, but now we're going to say $30,000. It's too early. It's too early to put a number on the cost because we don't know what the proper solution is. So again, back to today's agenda item, I'm asking you to either vote no on this or to table it for further discussion so that other petitioners can have an opportunity to be involved in this. The development agreement was determined between, I guess, the city attorney and the developer. And the petitioners were not given any opportunity to give input until today. So I hope that you will stand by your promises. I do feel it's very frustrated. A lot of us do. Again, we followed all that was requested of us. So I appreciate your time.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin. That concludes our citizens who've signed in to speak on this item. We do have Ms. Rubin again on item 9B and Kathy Kelly on 9B. But that concludes our citizens. So I will ask what the council's pleasure is on this agreement, if you want to take action on it this evening.
Mayor?
Ms. Fella?
Can I just ask Mr. Lay to come up one more time? Because I think that we're getting lost in the grief and the disappointment and the opposition of the original proposal with the number representing tied up into that. But what I have heard is that the intent to work with the citizens, to look at the very options that you've mentioned 3 or 4, and to trial them out so that everyone can, test out the road, so to speak, test drive it. All of the things that the citizens want is what the process we're going to go through. And by deferring this, we are not going to start that process. But I'm I will let you kind of clarify any misinformation that has been spoken, but it feels like we're very intent on listening to the neighbors about the solution they want. We've heard they have concerns, and we're going to address that. And it's getting all lost in whether it's this number or that number. And I don't think that that's the important part to focus on. The important part is we've heard the concerns about traffic, and we're going to address that, and they're going to be a part of that.
That's correct. And so with the estimate of 12 speed tables, yeah, that's way too many. You're not going to put that number in, but that provides us some added funds, or, if we want to do, for instance, if we wanted to put a radar speed limit sign in, that would just take place of 2 speed tables. But if we want to narrow the roadway, or if we want to do a pinch point with an island, that's the cost, because I've costed it out. It's about the same cost as a speed table. So we can do multiple items. If they're looking to do a traffic circle, that's really off the table. That's going to be more than $250,000. You have to reconstruct the roadway, because you're going to have to bring this, pretty wide roadway, 36 feet wide. You'd have to reconstruct several hundred feet of it to build this roundabout. And then you also have to allow emergency vehicles to progress through the roundabout, which means your island's going to be about 3 inches high. And so it just comes to it's a large challenge to do that with $200,000, and you're just addressing one point. It doesn't do anything along the entire corridor. And so really, to do things along the corridor, you're going to look at pinch points or speed tables. But there's, like I said, we'll go through all those options, talk with the residents to go through everything and get those addressed.
I think, by the intention of having this agreement on this evening, we know that the next case is recommended for a remand due to some changes since the Planning Commission recommended approval. So, but we are going to hear it, because you may have other thoughts that you want to relay to the developer. The hope in having this agreement before us this evening was to give some resolution to the neighbors for their angst over the traffic calming desires, and to allow them some certainty that there will be the dollars funded by the Odo Development Company, that this will, contingent upon the final plans, phase 1 and 2, being approved. Obviously, this is not going to happen tomorrow, when this case won't be before us again probably until January, if indeed the Plan Commission completes it, I think, in December. I think that's the plan. So that was the hope, that this would give you all something that then you could really focus on the plan itself, because these roads aren't part of the East Village or Village East or whatever it's being called now. So, Ms. Kane.
And I understand that, and I respect that. But as was stated tonight by the resident, what they were promised and what our own policy, unless she misstated it, and I'm not, was that an outside consultant would work with the city, would work with the residents to come up with the best option. So while I understand and I respect the intent of this development agreement, I understand where the $30,000 came in, but the $30,000 comes in only if the staff and our own personal staff does all the work and does all the install. That's how that $30,000 came in. It has nothing to do with outside consultants or involving anybody else in the process, and I think therein lies some of the issues with the residents, because clearly she read over and over and over by our own staff that was not what that is not what they were told, and it is certainly not what I remembered myself. So I appreciate the fact that this was allowing the residents to be heard tonight. I couldn't agree with Ms. Phillip any more than that she said over and over, they will be heard, they will be part of the discussion. I understand that. But I think it's the how that process is going to unfold is the problem here. The how and the when. Not that it will happen. And then the $30,000 just seems very quick, very, very, a big change from the $200,000 without, again, the residents clearly think that's without their input. Thank you.
Mr. Sipple.
Madam Mayor, I am thinking that we ought to consider starting the process with the Public Works Committee and the neighbors, looking at what-ifs in terms of traffic count on that thing and get the ball rolling so there's no surprises 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever. I know the Public Works Committee has a pretty busy agenda, but I'm a member of it, and I would be glad to participate in these discussions. But I think we ought to initiate, and maybe that's what we ought to do tonight, instead of approving the $30,000 agreement, remand this to the Public Works Committee to begin discussions so Odo Development is not surprised here in the next 6 months or year as to what has transpired, what our recommendation would be.
Mr. Azultine?
I agree with everything the councilman just said, except for how we get there. And first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Odo for being willing to put this money in escrow, because he is not obligated to do so. The main thing, and it's unfortunate the misunderstanding we had as regard to what we're able to do as a governing body by statute, and that we're here. But I do think this is a good solution that would do what Chuck is talking about in getting the process started, getting the Public Works Department and committee and the citizens together to figure out what needs to happen here, at least now with the current traffic situation they have. And as long as I sit here, I will commit to making sure that, if there's a gap there, we have a capital improvement program. We have the means to help. And this is a very large project. It's a big deal for the city of Leawood. And I think it's worth it to make sure that we've done everything we possibly can to mitigate any problems that are there now or could be exacerbated by this project. Having said that, I do think we should move forward on it and get it off the table so we can focus more keenly on the actual project.
Ms. Kane?
I take exception to the language that if we don't agree to this $30,000 development, that we are violating state statute. Because if you heard what our city attorney said, that it applies in one instance unless the developer agrees. And the developer did agree. So unless the developer agreed, which they did. And the residents were told over and over and over that the developer agreed. So yes, about the state statute, if we were looking at it in a bubble, no if the developer agreed, which they did. So those are two different things, so we can't hang our hook or hang our hat on that one hook. And I just lost my second train of thought. I'm sorry. It'll come to me.
Ms. Villa?
I would like to do both of the things that have been suggested here, which is to approve this resolution, and then also to do what Councilmember Sippel said, which is to give guidance to the Public Works Department to go ahead and begin this process so they can be coming closer to their solution. Because even right now, if we're making this agreement dependent upon the final approval, then we're just pushing down the road the ability to get started on that. And the approval of the final plan and the beginning of the construction of this development, if it proceeds, has nothing to do with the existing concerns that the neighbors have about their existing traffic. So let's address the existing traffic issue and get started on that. We'll have funding to reimburse the cities for their personnel expenses, and I trust Public Works. You've seen what Public Works can do when this Crossroad came out of nowhere, and we immediately got resolution. So I trust our professional staff in their ability to satisfy and work with the residents on coming up with a resolution. So let's begin that process. Let's get this out of the way, and then we'll get into the details of the final plan.
All right, and again, this agreement is for our approval, proposed for our approval this evening, but the dollars are contingent upon approval of the case 85-22. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
I remembered my thought. You're right, Mrs. Villa. We haven't seen a development. We don't have a development like this in the city of Leawood to this magnitude nor of this size. We've never had one. This is the very first one. We have not had the citizen input to this extent in decades. So this $200,000, and I don't want to get hooked up on that number, but that was a concession to the residents that the developer agreed upon through the course of this dialogue. So that I don't want to get lost in the works. Yes, Public Works should get started on it. Yes, the citizens will have the interaction, but that was a concession agreed upon by the developer. We're not violating state statute if the developer agreed on it, which that is not in consternation here. The paying back perhaps was, we've got email after email saying what the city said, but I don't think that's fair to the residents to bing, bang, boom, this is done, $30,000, we know better tonight. I don't think that's a fair for us to wipe out that very important concession on an issue that is incredibly important to all those residents, the 1,700 that filed the petition. Thank you.
All right, is there an interest in moving forward with the approval of this development agreement?
Move to approve.
Second.
Question to the
Motion.
mayor and to Patty. Does the second motion to address Mr. Sipples to follow that?
Yes, I'd make it a separate motion.
Thank you.
Right. We have a motion from Ms. Villa, second from Mr. Hazeltine. Is there any further discussion?
I just would reiterate what Chuck said. I think it's a good idea to get the process started and begin to solve the problem. Don't wait until, the whole, after we come back and, after another push off, come back in January or February. I mean, I think getting the staff on it now has a lot of value.
Mr. Sipple.
I'm following up with what Mrs. Kane said. I'm concerned that we might the Public Works Committee, might come up with a solution that costs $45,000 or $75,000. And if we agree to this tonight at 30, the city or the neighbors or Odo is going to have to pay the difference. And I'd like to get that a little bit locked down. And I'm sure that Odo Development doesn't want to have an open-ended number, but I think we ought to say, a range. Because like David said, he came up with an estimate of what the speed tables made out of concrete are going to be, but that might not be the solution. So I think we need to somehow have language in there where as the Public Works Committee and as the neighbors negotiate and we come up with a solution, we will finalize what that number might be. And, if it's within reason, and I don't know what that number is, that Odo Development will pick up the tab. If it's in excess of that, we'll have to do something else. I don't like the whole idea that we're limited to $30,000 because I don't think that could be the right answer.
Ms. Bennett.
The $30,000 is the offer from the developer because the developer does not believe that its traffic will cause that big of an impact on that street. So you're left with probably the same question you would have if there was a $200,000. Who's paying it back? Is the city paying the $200,000 back? Are the residents, because under our policy would have the residents pay it back. Normally, the city would front it by way of a bond, and then the residents would be assessed the money. But in this case, that didn't make sense, particularly with the developer coming in with the $30,000 offer. This agreement would be $30,000. I certainly allow Mr. Holland to come up and address that, but that's why this amount is here, because Mr. Lay said that's what it's going to take, and the Auto Development Company said that they would do that.
So, Mr. Holland or Mr. Odo, do you have any comments to Mr. Sippel's comments? He'd rather see a range than 30,000.
Thank you. We'd like to see this resolved as soon as we can. With all due respect, there was no agreement. And there was no, maybe at least on our end, we didn't have an agreement for that payment. And I guess I would respectfully disagree that it was a part of some compromise that allowed for the council to approve it. I don't think the council would have approved the project unless it merited approval. It didn't tip the scale to, in your opinion, for the developer to come up with an extra $200,000 check, and we're just going to give it to the city and have it be used carte blanche. That wasn't our understanding. There was no agreement. It wasn't part of the stipulation of our approval. We're here today to try to work through this issue. And again, I apologize, or we apologize for any misunderstanding that the residents may have. I don't fault them for what they believe. But I can just tell you from our vantage point, we had no agreement on this. We're trying to resolve it. I think this is a good way to do it. It allows the process to move forward, and that's what we would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the East Village Development Agreement. And after that is voted upon, we would entertain a motion to refer this to the Public Works Committee for meetings with the residents for options review. Are there any other comments? Oh, Ms. Larson?
If we vote to accept the agreement for the $30,000, do we have a commitment from the governing body? Should the traffic calming cost more than $30,000 that we are committed to make up the difference?
I think that would have to be discussed at a future point, because our
Right.
policy states that it would be a special benefit district. And so actually, we would front any additional funds, but it would be paid for by the residents. That's what our policy is. That's what we have done in the past with special benefit districts. Ms. Phila?
So got to remember, we were talking about a letter of credit, and here we're just talking about escrowing them out. So make sure we're talking about apples and apples when we make these comparisons. And maybe I should withdraw my motion, but my thought is we can authorize staff to begin the process. We can approve this so that we can move forward with certainty that we have what is in good faith, what our Public Works folks feel will do the job. And we still are going to have a final plan come back to us. And at that point in time, if it's a month, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, and we still think that we don't have this right, and we still want the developer to add to the kitty because it looks like other traffic, we still have that ability, because we're not approving the final plan tonight. So nothing gets solved here. Nobody moves the dime. Nothing gets done. We're just talking to ourselves, and I would really like to get this $30,000 locked and loaded, get the committee working with the citizens, and then figure out where we are.
Let me just say one thing about what you just said. The developer will have to address traffic from his project.
Right.
That is what may come in the future, not these 2 streets
Exactly.
that are not part of his project.
Exactly.
This is his agreement to fund something off-site. This is his willingness to do that. That's what we're voting on, just so you understand that. Mr. Hazeltine?
Thank you, Mayor. In regard to Ms. Larson's comments, I actually made a personal commitment earlier in that regard, and I would say the mayor's absolutely correct. That's not kind of how things work in our procedure in terms of the the benefit district thing and all that, but, or our budgeting process. But it does not preclude us, in my opinion, from us helping with that financially. And I'm here right now to tell the residents that this councilman is committed to that, should it fall above $30,000.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, but that isn't a vote for this evening.
No,
That-
I'm just,
He's just
it's a
saying his
discussion. No,
comments.
it's not a vote,
Okay.
but it's a discussion for future action.
I just said
to
it so
see
forcefully.
I know, I was gonna
where
say, that's
people's
what I wanted to
attitudes
hear.
are.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't want there to be more confusion after our discussion here tonight, because all I'm hearing from everyone and the residents is how confused everyone is. So I'm
Yes,
trying to make
very.
it as clear as we can make it. Ms. Kane?
The citizens have letters or emails in writing that showed that the mayor was copied, we were all copied, staff was copied, clearly stating from our city manager, who's not here unfortunately, or we would have ended this a half an hour ago, specifically saying that the money for the traffic calming was coming from the developer, not from them, even though that's the policy. That was not, that what you just said, Mayor, with all due respect, was super scary. We never told the residents were never under, this was a concession in the development, with the conversation with this development. They move forward with that understanding because they were told over and over and over from our staff and our city manager how this was going to come out. So yes, we should move forward with the Public Works Committee. No, we should not move forward with this that locks us into something that outside, professionals or whatever have not studied. They have not studied it. And that is in our policy, that's the next step after this. Thank you.
All right.
And unless Mr. Azeltine is committing his own money, which he's not, of course, that kind of statement can't be said tonight either.
Of course not. I said that for the benefit of any neighbors that might be listening in, because I actually voted again. I voted for the project.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say about the outside, advice, I have full confidence in our staff to figure this out. It's not rocket science, traffic calming. And so I have complete faith in our staff to be able to provide the expertise without hiring some consultant to come in.
Well, and I know most of you know this, if not all of you, but our Public Works Committee is made up of numerous engineers.
Yes.
That sit on it. I mean, there's a great deal of professional expertise on that committee, those of you who have sat on that, and I think maybe all of you have at some point. So this will be reviewed probably, as Mr. Lay said, in multiple meetings, and there will be lots of input. And I can think of a Pinch Point Street, Main Street, near the plaza, and I know exactly what you're talking about with those options as well. So, all right, so if you're ready for the question, this is the resolution approving, authorizing the mayor to execute a development agreement between the City of Leawood and Odo Development Company pertaining to the funding of the potential installation of traffic calming measures north of the East Village development, contingent upon approval of case number 85-22. We have a motion from Ms. Phyllis, second from Mr. Azeltine. And if there's no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, I think I need to see a show of hands for the ayes, please. So Rawlings, Phila, and Azeltine. And I didn't see anything from Councilmember Osman. So a show of hands for the nays, please. Larson, Sippel, Kane, and Harrison, and I still don't see Mr. Osmond. Mr.
Mr.
Osmond, are
Osmond
you
has-
voting?
He is,
Are you voting?
Nay.
Nay. All right, so the agreement fails 5-3, I believe, if I'm doing the math correctly. All right, so is there any other action? You talked about moving forward with the Public Works Committee. That would be an appropriate action, but obviously there will be no money involved from the developer that we'll be talking about.
I would like to make a motion that we send this issue to the Public Works Committee for further study and establishing a baseline of traffic.
I would second that.
Second from Ms. Harrison.
Yes, please.
For further study and establishing a baseline for traffic on 132nd Street and High Drive.
And High Drive.
All right. Is there any other discussion on that motion? All right.
is this just a baseline of traffic, or are they starting the process? I understand there's no, I think Mr. Lay had traffic counts done, and they could be updated, but I think he had them done within the last year or two. Or did you want them to proceed with working with the residents on various options for traffic calming measures?
My thoughts on that, Counselor, were that one of the first things would be to organize the Public Works Committee to begin work on this, get a process to involve the neighbors, and either if we have traffic counts, at what current counts are before the development is there, then we can study those, look at options of traffic calming practices, and then move from there, but get the process started. I could probably use better grammar to do that.
Basically, the same traffic calming process that we would normally use had there been a benefit district petition, but this is not using the benefit district financing.
I'll trust that you'll word it correctly.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Rawlings.
Speaking of confusion, I'm confused. Since this agreement has been not approved, the 30,000, does that mean that there'll be no money involved from the developer unless he decides to change his mind later? But the 30,000 is gone, and we'll never see that again. Is that correct?
At this point, yes.
Okay, thank you. So whatever the Public Works Committee comes up with, as far as maybe some alternatives in the cost, it's going to be on the citizens.
It will be, the question of how it will be funded was
Funded, yes.
to be determined.
To be determined.
I think
Because
language might be just to study the area in regard to traffic calming per our ordinance. Is that okay, John? Yeah.
Per our
Per our
policy.
policy, yeah. Is that all right?
If that is included in the language, does that meet your second, Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's better defined. If there's no further discussion on that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Mr. Osmond, I assume you voted in the affirmative?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
all right. Thank you. That motion is approved, and Mr. Lay, you heard the motion, so hopefully you understand it since it will involve you. And thank you, Ms. Bennett and Mr. Holland, for your work on this agreement. Appreciate it. Going now to 9B, resolution approving a final plan and final plat for East Village, previously Cameron's Court, Phase 1 and 2, located south of 133rd Street and east of Pawnee Lane. And the staff comment is the developer will ask for a remand of this matter to the Planning Commission. Staff requests the developer make its presentation, public be allowed to comment, governing body will have additional items for the Planning Commission to consider on remand. The reason for the remand request is because the developer is reconfiguring some parking in order to provide a storm shelter in each apartment building as required by the city. Staff agrees that this case with these changes should be remanded to the Planning Commission for review. Is there anything further, Mr. Klein or Ms. Bennett, that you'd like to comment on before we have the developer present?
I think the staff comment kind of covers it, and I know the developer will discuss the remand request as well.
All right. And Mr. Klein, did you have any opening comment before I call on the developer?
No.
All right, thank you. Mr. Odo, are you the one, or Mr. Holland? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Again, my name is Curtis Holland, counsel for the developer. For the record, my address is 900 West 48th Place, Suite 900, Kansas City, Missouri 64112. Yeah, I'm going to make just a very brief couple of opening comments, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Odo to go through, briefly try to go through the plan and get input and allow for, I understand some residents who might want to have input on it as well. So I thought we would get this started. We have been working with staff for many months on this already. And so it's probably now time to at least present it to you. But yes, as indicated by Ms. Bennett, we are requesting a remand back to the Planning Commission. Just a little explanation about that, where we are and what happened. There's been some, I hate using the word misunderstanding again, but there has been some more clarification between Planning Commission and tonight's meeting as to certain components of the project, namely this has to do with storm shelters and the number of storm shelters and how those would be implemented into the project. And we now understand, after some discussion with your staff since the Planning Commission meeting, that each of the apartment buildings that we'll present to you tonight, this is with respect to the mansions apartments, would require a storm shelter in each one of the buildings. And it would have been our understanding previously that we could accommodate the storm shelters by using or having really a community shelter, a gathering place that wasn't required to be in each individual building. And the change now, in addition to it costing substantially more to provide the storm shelters, it does impact our garage structures, how we would install those, and does impact our parking layout and spaces. And so there, in discussions with the staff, it was our understanding and agreement that we would take this to the Planning Commission back and let them look at the changes. Not unusual that we would have to go back there, considering how we got here in the first place. Hopefully we'll just come back, get that resolved, and then come back to you, and I understand maybe in January. So that's really our request tonight, is to ask you to remand it. But yes, understanding that you all had this in the system for a while. You've been getting inundated with emails and correspondence. We do believe it's appropriate to have input from their input, at least in a public setting. It's not necessarily a public hearing. The changes we're talking about aren't substantial changes as defined in your code. Our final plan, in fact, is substantially compliant with your approved, or with the approved preliminary development plan. So these are minor revisions, but yeah, understand that maybe the neighbors or residents would like to have some input. We're okay with that, as well as any comments or input you might want to have yourselves as to the plan. So anyway, we have a PowerPoint to go through to show you our plan, talk about a couple of things that were mentioned in some of the emails with respect to maybe berming, architecture, and so on and so forth. It's our belief, and again, we're not here to relitigate the zoning. I know there was some comments and some of the emails, not all, but some of the emails where I think they just wished that this had never been approved, and so that was maybe the basis for some of their concerns. We understand that, but we're not here today on that. This is a final plan. That's not how we do business. We're, again, in substantial compliance with our preliminary development plan. And The plan we're going to present to you tonight meets all of the code requirements relative to all of the items and including the architecture and so forth. We're in complete conformance with the LDO and the 135th Street Community Plan as it relates to those issues and aspects, and would say, I know that there's, again, some discussion, quite a bit of discussion about what, on the architecture in particular with respect to the mansions. We feel it's appropriate for the project. I would note specifically that when this project was first approved, or was approved here last January, that there's a specific stipulation that says we're not approving any of the design or architecture for the buildings, and instead that is an item to be determined at final plan, which is where we are today. So there's been no change in anything that we've done to date. We're just now presenting these plans to you for the first time with this application. So wanted to clarify that, and also indicate that with respect to the architecture, and again, focusing on the mansions, because I don't think there's been any real complaint about the twin villas and really our design standards for the single family now that they've been updated. But they are all, our design is a contemporary, more modern appearance. It's consistent and cohesive with the rest of the development. We're consistent with our development itself. We're not necessarily trying to become consistent with our surrounding neighbors and what their homes look like. But, as Mr. Odo is investing, really in this case, upwards of $100 million into the project, we think he should have a substantial say in what the architecture of his buildings will look like. And would ask you to defer to our architect, Clover Architect, who, as you know, is well regarded, not just locally, but also nationally. And so we're really happy and proud of our elevations, our architectural design of those buildings. And with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Odo for his hopefully brief presentation of the plan itself. And again, happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holland.
Do I just click on that?
And for the record, if you could both introduce yourselves, please. Thank you.
All right. First of all, I'm Rick Odo, President of Odo Development, 15200 West 105th Terrace, Lenexa, Kansas. This is Patrick.
And Patrick Reuter, R-E-U-T-E-R, Clover Architects, 8813 Penrose Lane, Lenexa, Kansas.
Thank you.
He's one of our lead architects. Okay, we have it on the board so you guys all see what I'm talking about here. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to come before you again with a final plan that I know you'll be very pleased with, or at least I certainly hope you'll be very pleased with. We have been working on this. We got this approved, I believe, in January 3rd of this year, and it took us this long to get our final plan to fruition, to design it, get it through engineering, everything we need to do. We've been working with it. Now it's been 3 years that we've been working with things to get through the city of Leawood, and I hope we get something that we can get approved soon. First, the project before you is 100% compliant with the LDO and approved and in compliance with the approved preliminary design plan. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval. The current plan before you has substantially the same as the approved preliminary plan with a few less units than before. The density of the two phases we're talking about tonight to get started on this is only 7.15 units per acre. That's extremely low. That's for both phases combined. We have increased our green space to over 45%, far exceeds the LDO. We'll be building 9 parks. Some of these are pocket parks, some are very large parks. Chadwick will be moved up, and we'll start construction of the Chadwick Park with the beginning of phase 2 when we put those streets in. We've provided for heavily landscaped 3-foot berms along 133rd. Before you is the approved preliminary plan, as you can see. And then I've got this slide where it has the preliminary plan approval on your left, and on your right, phases 1 and 2 with what we're looking at doing. As you can tell, here's a single family. You see where my arrow is going. Single family lines up exactly with the single family over here. You got Chadwick Park. We got Chadwick Park. We got we've got the brownstones here. We've got twin villas along here. It all lines up. It is virtually the identical plan as what you approved before. The two phases combined is 7.15 units. If you look at just the mansion style and the brownstone units together, phase 2, it's less than 9 units to the acre. Very, very low density. It'll take us about 2 years to get this part built out, at least 2. The single family and twin villas will probably take us 2 to 3 years to get built and sold as well. Hopefully it can get started, get sold beforehand. One of the things I do want to show here, here's a little blow up of the phase 2. And I do want to, where is the dog park and the gardens?
So on the site plan here, we've indicated the dog park in this, the northeast section of this development here, and the community garden has been identified as this portion here along High Drive.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. That's a super small print that's hard to see in one of these plans here. These are the 9 parks and pocket parks that we will be building with phase 1 and 2. The 2 things I really want to bring out is that these parks together would be about 5 acres. Once again, over 45% green space. We have Chadwick Park, which is number 9. Is about the 2 acres that you guys requested. That was a requirement from when we met in January that we met. And we're also building the 10-foot bike trail along the east end of this site, the west end of the church. We'll be building the first phase of that with this development. And these parks here are open to the public. And here is a landscape plan, but I want to go backwards on this. I do want to say something besides this on the East Village Parks, everything that we're putting in. Just in your stipulation number 3, I'll be paying over $700,000 in park fees and impact fees in addition to building 5 acres. And that $700,000 is just for phases 1 and phase 2. Plus I'll have additional impact fees and more fees with all the other phases. We've got a total of 6 phases. I also will be, just in phases 1 and 2, be paying about $700,000 to the city for building permits. So the city's going to get about $1.5 million right off the bat in fees and just collected fees from me. Now they won't have very much expenses in this. They will have some because they've got to do the building inspections and they've got to oversee the construction of all this, but it is a very big windfall for the city. Okay. This is a landscape plan that we've got. We colored in where all the trees are, just a section of where the twin villas are along 133rd. I think you guys all know what we're talking about. High Drive to the north is up here where my arrow is. Here's a cross section I'm going to show you in just a second. Of course, the trees around the, here's our High Drive over to the left side here. And if I go to the next page, this is what you're going to see from 133rd. As you can see, you've got the berming, and through here, you see the backside of the twin villas. It is an intensely landscaped area, and those words came from your own planners. That was the words they told me when I was here last time before Planning Commission, that this is one of the most intensely landscaped communities they've ever seen. So I wanted to let you know that. We've got deciduous trees, we've got evergreens, we've got tall trees, we've got lots of bushes and shrubs, so we've got high and low coverage. We've got it all. You don't even see the apartments from 133rd because of the berming and the twin villas and single family going through there. And don't forget the single family homes. We're protecting very nice homes with $1 million to $1.2 million valued homes. We got the twin villas that are going to be $750,000 a side. The builder for the single family is Jeff Robinson, one of the most premier builders in the town. He's in the back if you'd like to have him talk about anything. He's committed to buy the single family and get started on the single family lots. So we're committed to get started. And like I said before, because everyone's worried they're not going to get the single family, that's the very first thing that's going to go in is the streets for the twin villas and the single family, and we're going to get started on trying to build those first. Along with the landscaping along 133rd, as we build out the buildings, we'll be putting these in. This is a cross-section we wanted to show from, here's 133rd. You can see the cross-sections. Here's the west one and the east one. The top one is the west, and you've got the single-family homes on the far right. You can see them I'm circling. This is single-family. Across the street from single-family. Across the street from another single-family. And way down here, over 700 feet away, is the four-story buildings. And you can see the line of sight really is blocked by the single-family. When you go to the twin villa areas, you've got the same issue. Here's the single-family here. You've got 133rd here, another 50-foot setback, and then you got the twin villas. Then you have a street, and then we have the brownstones, and about, I want to say, and I could be wrong, it's like 380 feet away, maybe it's 400 feet away, you've got the first apartment buildings here. They won't see them. The grade goes downhill from here. You can see the line of sight. And then one of the other advantages, you see the line of sight here, one of the other advantages of the new mansion styles that we're presenting tonight is they got a 9-foot shorter elevation. That 9 feet, you can see here, they don't even see the line of sight. They don't even see the buildings from 133rd. The other thing I want to show you is the berms. If you go back up to the west side, the top one, you see 133rd Street here at 990. We've got the berm at 994. If you can see the elevations, I hope you can see that in your site there. We have 4-foot elevations, 4-foot berming in this area. And then we've got the backyards of the single family. On the twin villa side, we've got 133rd. Once again, you've got the berm that goes up from 970 to 973. And then you've got a walkout here on this one. And so we've got berming or embankment the entire length of 133rd. And as you can see, very heavily landscaped per my promises. One of the things that you said before, and I heard you clearly, was that we're required to have a more consistent, cohesive community. I was told before that some of the community, it looks like you just threw 3 or 4 communities together. There wasn't enough harmony. There wasn't enough cohesion or common elements. It wasn't very compatible, the communities that we had. So we heard what you said, and I want to thank you for those comments early on, that we need to be more consistent, more common elements, and compatibility. Your code requires that, and MXD have maintain coherent architectural images. So we are doing that. When we heard that, I knew what we had to do. The mansion styles, and by the way, I want to remind people what a mansion style is. A mansion style is a small apartment building, 8 to 14 units in size, and it's about the size of a large home. Sometimes it's called the big home look. Other people call it mansion style. It's still the same thing. And it's not a style, it's just a size. The size of the buildings that we presented to you before, exact same width, exact same depth, the footprint's the same. We just have changed the architecture. We didn't change anything because we didn't present anything. We are presenting now. And when I was told that we had a more cohesive and compatible community with the MXD designs, I was right across the street from me is this most beautiful contemporary house. And I said, this is our inspiration for the big homes that we need to go forward. And we already had the twin villas kind of in that range. The retail is clearly in a more modern look, and we want to continue on with that. So now we have a very compatible, cohesive MXD design, and I'm going to walk you through these real quick. Up here in the corner where I'm circling, this is a 12-unit walkout. So on the back side, it walks out like a house would. Here's a 12 or 14-unit size mansion style, once again the flat roof. Here's our twin villas. Here's our big house look. Here's our single family. Here's the back side of the walkout, because the back side of this looks the same, by the way, the 12 and 14. The architect went into more detail of this. As you can also see from our office buildings, retail, and the four-story community, they all have a lot of common elements, common features, and a much more cohesive plan, more thought out. And so I appreciate the input that you guys gave us. We now have a product that is very well received by the community, and this is where things are going. More contemporary, this is what the millennials are looking for. This is what you're going to see to plan for the next 40 years. Instead of, I've been building the other the other mansion style like at Villa Milano for 28 to 30 years now. And it's time to update that. If you look on this one here, the massing, the width's the same, the depths on these things are the same. The only difference is we kind of put a flat roof on it, and we brought in the elements that we had in the other buildings to here, so we have a more cohesive plan. In the process, we lowered the height of these buildings 9 feet, which should be a huge benefit, because once again, you won't see them from 133rd. You will from 135th, but 135th corridor is very modern, very contemporary style up and down there. With this, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and I'll let you take it from here. Do you want to go perfect to this one, or where do you want to go?
2 down. We'll get it. I got it.
Right there.
Awesome. Thank you. As Rick has mentioned, our goal from the very beginning of the design process and the project has been to create a cohesive and compatible development in East Village that evokes a sense of place not only to its future residents but also all its visitors. The variety of different building types is shown on this slide. As Rick mentioned, the top 2 rows outline what is actually being constructed as part of this final development plan in phase 1 and 2. And then the bottom images are the future phases 3, 4, 5, and 6. So as you can tell by looking at this slide, we've been able to utilize similar forms, massing, architecture elements between all the buildings, and along with a complementary color palette that really creates that cohesive, transitional, and contemporary architectural design. So as Rick was going through this too, along with the height differentials between our proposed East Village mansion style and what exists at Villa Milano, this diagram goes through and you can see that kind of 9-foot reduction in overall massing. So to kind of emphasize Rick's point, you will not be able to see these from 133rd Street with all the plantings and understory plantings that we have proposed. The rendering below shows how we are achieving this style. We're pulling in some of those residential style materials that you see, such as stone and siding, and then we're applying them in conjunction with contemporary forms to create this reduced mass. Another important item to consider is the existing and surrounding environments. As you all know, per the Leawood comp plan, it outlines the 135th Street corridor between 133rd and 137th as the MXD portion. And in looking at our adjacent mixed-use development neighbors, as you can see, kind of pictured below, is the previously approved Regents Park development on the left, which outlines some of the office and retail buildings that were approved as part of that development. And then also along with the 135 MXD, which was final development planned. As you can see, these buildings have a very similar contemporary architectural style, and we feel that our buildings, not only in phases 1 and 2, but throughout all the phases of this project, will continue to create a cohesive corridor that evokes a sense of place. Another piece that we looked at when going through the final designs of these buildings was just the overall Leawood mixed-use developments and finding consistency between our buildings to create an overall, again, Leawood development that meshes well with the community. Our buildings have similar contextual massing and accentuated roof lines, such as the recently approved 86th and State Line development, which is to the north of this project. And lastly, another part of the mixed-use communities that we looked at was at Park Place, really going through and again pulling elements that we found complementary to the design intent behind this project. So when you look at this picture from Park Place, you can kind of see some of the forms here. in the building, such as the mass elements and some of those accentuated roof lines that we started to kind of pull in and mimic in all these phase 1, 2, and 3 and 4 throughout the project. Part of creating a cohesive community is also having a complementary material palette. This slide outlines all the conceptual materials to be utilized as a base for all development in East Village. Just so it's pretty clear, the materials outlined in the red are the currently proposed materials, which would be on the phase 1 and 2 buildings, which consist of brick, cast stone, stucco, different lap siding panels, and then different storefront and window colors. Now I'd like to kind of go through in more detail each of the different building styles and types. For each of the mansion-style buildings, we've come up with 2 options. Option 1, this is the walkout building front, has the garages and has stone and the lap siding. This is the rear elevation of that building. Option 2, again, similar massing and forms, and we keep some of the similar materials, but we're pulling in different colors of brick and just changing the facade materials around a little bit, so we're still creating unique design, so it's not one monotonous, every single building looks exactly the same. So we're scattering that different designs of each of these buildings throughout the development to make sure we create that community feel. One thing I did want to point out, looking at some of these units here, is some of these buildings will have really nice, second floor units that have very extensive patios that'll have really good rents, and they're very desirable type units. Again, this is the 12-unit slab and grade option 2, again highlighting the brick versus some of the more stone and siding elements. And this here's a view kind of looking at the side of that. So you can kind of see some of those garages that are screened on the side. And then we have both 12-unit and 14-unit slab-on-grade buildings to achieve the desired unit mix that we have. So the 14-unit slab-on-grade buildings function very similarly to the 12-unit buildings, the only real difference being kind of this first floor level here, as we have 2 additional units on the ground level. This is our conceptual imagery of the brownstones. As you probably saw earlier, these are very similar to the ones that were originally proposed as that is part of future phase 3 around Chadwick Park. So again, those pull similar materials, the stone, brick, and siding, because they are they're larger buildings in length than the mansion styles. So again, cohesive overall development. And again, some of these units too have front porches that front high drive. And so these renderings are the 2 different brownstones on the north and south side of high drive. This is the renderings of the proposed clubhouse, which is just to the east of high drive. Again, showing the front and the back with the pool. And with that, I would like to turn it back over to Rick for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Reuter.
Or Kurt.
I think that's our show. That's it. That's all we really wanted to present to you tonight. And if you have any comments or questions about that, what we've provided to you, happy to do that. And I know you want to hear from the residents as well. Again, our request is for a remand so we can make the few changes and then come back to you on the rest of it. If and when we do, there might be some stipulations we want to talk about. Don't want to take up your time about that tonight if we're going to do a remand. But anyway, appreciate your time. Thank you.
So before we begin with our questions, my question to you is, do you have any of the effects of adding a safe room to each of the large apartment building units worked out at this point, or are you just going to take that to the Plan Commission?
I wouldn't say we have it completely worked out, so yeah, we're going to have to have them
So you're
look
not
at it and
prepared to
discuss it.
present that to us?
Right,
so-
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree
I
that
think
that's how we would handle that. I mean, there are some
That's
changes we
fine.
still need to work through.
Yeah,
but
I think
yes.
we will have enough questions just on what we just saw.
Sure.
So thank you for that. And I'll let council go before mine. Ms. Villa and Ms. Harrison.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are you asking for feedback on option 1 and 2, or I know you put them forward, or are you letting the citizens get input on that, or how are you handling these variabilities?
I'm sorry, I think there's a misunderstanding on that. We're going to have all of these looks.
So the owner of the townhouse will pick which one they like then?
Well, let's just
I'm a
go
little
backwards
confused.
here. I'm trying to get down here. No, we're going to have, so when we say option 1 and 2, we're going to have a black stone with a nichita type look, and then we'll also have it with a brick look. So we'll have 2 options for each building type. What Patrick was saying is that instead of having 30 buildings all with one color, we're having the 30 buildings, 3 different styles of buildings, the walkout, the 12 on slab on grade and 14 on grade, each one with 2 different color palettes.
Got it. Okay,
And
thank
we
you.
will spread these things out so it's not monochromatic and it's not just all the same. We want it to have a sense of style and look, and there's enough uniqueness between them that it makes it look a lot nicer than them all the same.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Did I understand that you are moving up, what do you want to call the park?
Chadwick.
From Phase 4 to Phase 2?
Yes, that was
But-
at the request of staff, and we were happy to do so.
But did I hear there's no retail?
We're not going to do that part yet because you really need to have phases 3 and 4 built in for that part. We're going to build the park out
Okay.
for it, which it never had retail in the park itself. But
And I
we're going
saw-
to put in the trees and bring in underground for possible electricity and everything we need so that we can get those trucks in so that when we have food trucks, they'll have electricity or they'll have a lot of generators. But we're going to set it up for it. But the most important part is the park will be there with the trees, and it'll look nice from day when we open up.
Okay. And did I see something about reducing the sidewalks from 6 to 5?
There's a lot of discussion between staff, planning commission, and us that whether they should have 6 foot. We feel like, around Chadwick, 6 foot, 8 foot's fine. Around through the rest of the area in this part, phases 1, 2, it's going to be more of a residential style, and certainly on front of a single-family home, the twin villas, and off to the side here, where we've got all these these small, the mansion styles, the small apartment buildings. There's not a lot of traffic over there. To put a 5-foot sidewalk on each side is more than adequate, instead of a 6-foot, and Planning Commission just agreed with us.
And so,
Yeah, just to quickly add to that too, the 5 foot is what was required by the LDO, and by providing what was required, also we do save that 1 foot of linear length as green space across the entire development, which is thousands of lineal feet.
so the 133rd Street, are there sidewalks there?
133rd's already existing. It has double sidewalks and a 10-foot, I believe it's got a 10-foot bike trail on 133rd. Are you talking about 134th Street here?
Yes, sorry. No. So,
Up here?
yeah,
133rd's already existing, and it has double sidewalks, and I believe on one side has a 10-foot bike trail as well.
okay. So they already have that infrastructure in there, you're just adding to it.
I'm into it.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And I think High Drive has 6-foot sidewalks.
Yeah, I'm fine with 6 foot on High Drive
High
because I
Drive.
figure that's a big public area that people would be walking. I
Right.
just want it to get, when I get off the main drive, it should go to 5 like a residential.
Okay. And then this has nothing to do with you have in front of us, but I would ask you to take a very serious look at solar. We're forecast at some point in time to have increasingly hot summers, and I'd like to see that this really has a sustainability factor to it, and these flat roofs really look for, whether it's a Tesla tile or some other. I think that the cost of that has been validated, that people pay for that when they want to resell it. The fact that you would lower the cost of operations and you have the ability to really create something unique. I'm going to look forward to how well these buildings are built and insulated so that the cost of heating and cooling these are significant. It seems like this is the time. This is the time to take advantage of options that maybe weren't there when we first started these discussions. I mean, I've seen projections that by 2050, we're going to have Saudi Arabia weather. And nobody wants to live in without air conditioning, because I happen to be in England when they hit their record of 104, and 5% of their population has air conditioning. So the other 95 don't. So they're going to have a harsh awakening if they continue to have that. And so I'd like us to get on the right side of that growth and really consider how that could be implemented now, and the payback would be huge.
Okay. One of the advantages of the flatter roofs is it's very conducive to solar energy.
Right.
You can put the panels on very easily, where some of the other pitch roofs make it hard to, impossible
Absolutely.
to do. And the way we've got the setup, if solar becomes, if someone wants to add it to the brownstones or the twin villas, they can do that, or single family, they can do that themselves. We're not going to stop that. Not that we'll set it up so it's very easy to do. You can run jerry tubes through it, conduit through it. It's very easy to do. On the apartments, it's also very easy because we can have a common conduit that just goes to the roof, so that if it ever is needed or is cost effective. And in Missouri, it's very cost effective because of the rebates that the state and the utility give. Kansas right now hasn't have them yet. I'm hoping they do, and when they do, we'll be able to take advantage of it.
And
So
it
we're-
also applies to parking. You know, if you
Oh.
have covered parking that puts solar on.
If the code allows it, it's easy to put on. All the garages will have electricity in them so that you can plug an EV car in.
Well, it's your cost of operations for apartments, so I hope that you will seriously consider that when you bring forward the final.
Okay.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. I have a lot of notes in front of me, but for now, I am going to keep my comments to the issue, the remand issue, because I was under the impression that was really what was on the table tonight. If we can discuss design later, and there is time for that, and it's not 2 o'clock in the morning, I would like very much to do that. And maybe this is a question for staff, maybe for the developer. I noticed that you now are referring to these as 12-unit slab-on-grade mansion style, and I don't believe that was the verbiage that was used in January. And that's fine, you can call them what you want, but I noticed the slab on gray would imply that you didn't know that there needed to be storm shelters. And maybe, again, this is a staffer question or the developer. Did you or they not know about our storm shelter requirements back in 2021? I don't understand how this is new information, because I don't recall this being a new part of our LDO. So again, I don't know if this is a question for our staff or for you, Mr. Odo, or the architect, but is somehow this a surprise that we require storm shelters?
Actually, the storm shelters we do require within each of the buildings, and so I did check with Travis to see when that was in the building code. It's actually in the building code rather than the Leawood Development Ordinance. And I believe that the basement portion was in 2010, so it's been there for a while. And then the other one, as far as allowing storm shelter, for instance, on the one slab on grade, they can actually add a storm shelter within that area that's still above ground, but that's reinforced to meet the ICC 500. That's been in effect since, I guess, April of 2020,
Okay.
so a little bit before this.
So not so much new. Is this different, Mark, than what maybe Lenexa or other communities where Mr. Odo and Mr. Clover would have been building? Are we unique?
Travis might be better to answer that, but it's my understanding that we are probably a little bit more thoughtful in including this. I think a lot of cities, they just require, as far as that you have a community shelter that you could do.
And Mr. Torres is coming in at your beck and to respond.
Thank you.
Good evening, Travis Torres, Director of Building and Code Enforcement. We are a little unique in Leawood. I think Lenexa is similar to that requirement, but as far as, there's a couple different things. We do require a storm shelter for apartment buildings and institution, like nursing homes, commercial residential living. We do
So
require a
Park
storm
Place.
shelter, and that was adopted in April of 2020. But then we had a longstanding requirement that required a basement for apartment buildings. And the exception to that would be to provide a storm shelter. Because many times you got to meet ADA too, so it might be difficult to do, to have that basement storm shelter, and you may prefer to provide a storm shelter and be able to provide ADA access to that.
I
So-
get it. I understand that they are probably expensive and difficult and challenging to create. I'm just trying to understand if this is suddenly new information that they needed to be a part of this terrific big plan that's been in the works for a couple of years. I just don't understand really why it's being remanded as if, oh, wait, we didn't know we had to build those. But maybe so that seems a little frustrating because I hate delaying. I know this is all money. It's all money. Clocks are running, but so I'm just surprised by the fact that, and then the slab on grade is implying there's nothing underneath there. Slab on grade, no basement, nothing under there, and that's not how I remember these being referred to before.
And that part, yep.
So I'll address the naming convention first, then we can get into the details of the community shelter piece. They have been named, the breakout of these mansion styles is slab on grade 12s, 14s, or walkouts was part of the preliminary development plan. If you go back through some of the charts we submitted, that's been the same nomenclature we've used. So I think because we're now focusing on the phase 2 specifically, where we're getting into more of those details, is probably where you're seeing it more in the limelight, if you will. To address the community shelter, we were aware of the requirement to have community shelters. Our current, proposal, I'd like to go back to the site plan real quick. The ICC 500 allows for, or outlines different requirements for 2 different types of shelters. One being a community style shelter and one being a residential style shelter. Community shelters, by definition, are larger, and their intent is to serve a greater community. It's going to be faster just to go through here. So in the plan as it stands before you today, our current proposal was to have 2 community shelters throughout the project that were within this building here and this building here. And so those community shelters would be large enough to handle all the population within. We split them up on the east and west sides of High Drive, and community shelters allow up to a half-mile travel distance to get to them. So that was our original intent, to meet the ICC 500 requirements. Travis and I had a very lengthy discussion about the exact language of the code amendment that you all have in place. Which is where we came to the, I guess it was more of a late interpretation on our part that it needed to be within each of the buildings instead of what would be allowed as a community shelter. So our original intent was to always comply with the ordinance. It was more of an interpretation of how we did so in compliance with the ICC 500.
Okay.
I'm going to follow up in more layman's term. We met the federal code. It only needs 1 storm shelter as a group. And we put 2 in because we didn't want people to cross High Drive, so we started off with 2. Then I just found out, literally, after we passed Planning Commission, that it went to Travis for some code looks at it about the storm shelter. And that's when we found out that you have 1 storm shelter per building. And yes, you're the only city that I'm aware of in the metro that has that. I build in Lenexa, I build in Olathe, Overland Park. They meet the federal, and that's all they go off of is the federal code of 1. So when we found that out, it's going to minutely change these plans, but just enough that we're willing to go back and be remanded to meet it. Whether we need to or not, I don't know, but I'm willing to take that just to make sure we follow all procedures.
I, for one, am very grateful you're doing it.
And I'm happy
And-
as soon as.
Yeah, because we've had this discussion
We've
before.
had it, if
Yeah.
I can just say, and when I
Right.
talked to Travis, we had a very polite conversation. He showed it to me in the code, and I was like, it's in the code. I didn't know that. I'm sorry about that. You're right. It's about $35,000 per storm shelter to do, so it's about $1 million hit to this. And it's like, well, it's code. I don't have a choice, so we'll do it. And that was, and he'll tell you, that was the end of the discussion. As soon as you showed me it's not the federal, because I kept looking at the federal, I said, and not the, I didn't know about this local one, so I'm sorry.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Azultine?
This has nothing to do with your project, but specifically, it's more of a question for Mr. Klein. Do we need to amend the development ordinance to include that, to reflect the building code?
I think it's something that we probably could put in the Leawood Development Ordinance just to make it clear, since a lot of development, especially the preliminary plan before they get into the engineering, would make it clear up front.
We'll just, discuss that with Patty or whoever, and, if we need to do it, let's do it.
Ms. Harrison, were you through with your questions at this point?
No, I will say that I'm thrilled that there will be shelters in each of these buildings, because I'm doing the mental image of me getting my Johnson County alert at 2 in the morning saying, the big one's coming, and trying to round up my 3 cats and trying to get a half mile away. It would be a Dorothy-sized mess if I, so.
Federal was half mile. We limited it to 570 feet, so we were far
Have you
exceeding
ever herded
that.
cats? There we go. So I'm thrilled that each building will have a safe place for our residents, whether it's,
I didn't hear each building was having it. I heard 2
or every
community.
other building, maybe.
No, each building.
Each building will
Each
have
building
it.
will have a safe room.
So what were you pointing out to the 2 buildings?
That was the old plan.
That was before. That
thank
was
you.
in the preliminary.
After.
That's why it's being
Parking
remanded.
lots a little bit and moving buildings is a few feet here, a tweak here and there, insignificant. You won't, it'll be hard.
No,
impossible
it's
to
great,
see.
great. I thank you for the correction. I'm pleased.
Any other comments at this point? Ms.
Thank you, not at
Ms.
this time.
Kane?
Thank you.
This is atypical for us because we know there's a remand, yet I think the purpose of this was we were allowing citizen input, and the purpose of this is we wanted the planning commission and the developers to hear our input as well.
If you had things other than this safe room, and I have 2 questions I've been waiting to ask. If you have anything you want the developer to address at the Plan Commission remand, this is just an opportunity for you to provide that.
Great. Is it my turn?
Sure.
Okay.
Put her on 5 minutes.
Jeff Robinson does a great job, A+. That's an excellent choice. He's a wonderful builder. You will do a super good job on the single-family home, so welcome, Mr. Robinson. Hey, isn't that a song? Wait, no.
Here's to you.
That was a joke. Thank you about the storm shelters. You're right, it is in the code. You had to do it, or that would have been a whole nother conversation. Thank you for moving up Chadwick Park. I think that will be great. I hope you take into serious consideration the comment and the outcome of the traffic calming conversation earlier. A lot of numbers being thrown around tonight, but if this is a $100 million project and that one was 200,000, again, it all adds up in the end. But I hope you understood how serious it was of a misunderstanding and how serious we were about that. So I know some people are interpreting that the $30,000 went away, and I hope the council person hopes in the end that something more than that comes back. I'll just leave it there. You mentioned the $700,000 park fee and the $700,000 in building permits being a very big windfall for the city. That kind of language is exactly what gets us in trouble with our residents, because then we've had emails that talk about our palms being greased and the sort. So I do take exception to hearing that kind of language, because that's exactly what we get thrown back in our face, and these are our neighbors. I go to the the grocery store, and half of the people who write these, they know my name, they know my face, as you all know. So I take exception to that language, just for the record. I'm not clear on the sidewalks. I heard about the 5 foot, 6 foot. I hear about them more green. I appreciate that comment, Patrick. Are there sidewalks on 134th Street?
On both sides of 134th, there's sidewalks, 5 foot sidewalks.
134th.
That's
Are
where
you
the
referring to
single
this
families
street
are,
right
right?
here? Yeah.
I just couldn't tell
The
from
plan
the
isn't
picture.
up in front of us.
I know that there's yeah, so in between there are sidewalks on both sides of that.
5 foot sidewalks, which LDO code is 5 foot.
Oh,
We met that.
okay,
We just
couldn't-
wanted the extra green space instead of concrete. And
I
Planning
couldn't
Commission agreed.
quite tell from this little picture that they are indeed there. So I wanted to make sure about that, so thank you for that. I do know that there was some talk about the size of the berms, 3 foot and 4 foot here, and, you know, and the sight lines, so I appreciated those diagrams. I wish the berms were higher, just like we ended up putting a much higher berm than that in Gezer Park as a concession to Waterford. So just for this point in the conversation, I'm bringing that up. I do like the name change from Cameron Court to East Village, just for the sake of this. Say it?
East Village of Leawood.
East Village of Leawood. I do, my little brain, because I know you own land on the west side of Mission, and I know the Odos own land on the south side of Mission. Just for the record, I don't want to see a west village of Leawood and a south village of Leawood. This councilwoman would not like that at all. But East Village of Leawood sounds very good for this one development. But then let's
describe it as the far east end of Leawood, and that's how it got started.
Yeah, well, I don't want a west and a south, but that's just me. Mr. Holland said he has STIPs to discuss at the time of the final, so that makes me a little bit nervous because you know how close this vote was over and over and over, right? Split votes at the Planning Commission, split votes at the City Council meeting. So whatever that means, we'll be watching closely what those STIPs might be that you're taking exception to, or this council person will. And then lastly, I would like to talk about just a little bit. I liked the traditional look with the sloped roofs back. That's my personal opinion. So if this time we're supposed to be giving you input, that's what I am. Patrick, what kind of roofing material was going to go on those slopey roofs? The more sloped roofs, if you had stuck with the traditional look.
I'm sorry, are you referring to the slanted roofs that we have now that have the TPO on them?
Yes. Yes, you took out the mansions, and the mansions now have very flat roofs, as opposed to they originally had more slope roofs. That's the 9-foot reduction in height. And I was wondering what kind of roofs those were going to be.
You were wondering materials?
Yes, I was wondering the material versus what the material is now.
Yeah. And I think I just want to be clear, the elevations that were shown at preliminary were not approved. So there is not any change that has been made.
Yeah,
These are the elevations that we are coming in with and that we like, and we feel like they fit the entire community.
Yeah, I get the language. But if we're supposed to be giving input now, I'm just saying Mr. Odo made the comment that the community liked these flat roofs. This look better. I don't know that the community around this had any input into that. And so if the time now, and so going back to it, what would the material have been versus what is it now?
Since we didn't explore that option, I don't think we could probably tell you exactly what that material would be at this stage, because that's not the type of development we are proposing.
Well, then I'll leave it at this. If the slope roofs had been involved, it's my understanding because of the size of the it's not a single family, that it would have to be some kind of a concrete tile or a synthetic slate or something of the sort.
Yeah, whatever's LEO compliant.
Right, so we went from synthetic slate or concrete tile to a flat roof, which again, if it's at this point in the conversation, we're offering our input, that would be my input on that. I preferred the slope roofs with the better roof, if you will, or the more, they probably would have been more expensive looking roof that would be more in line with the neighbors around them. That's my opinion there. And then I do like what Ms. Phyllis said about solar, though, if that comes down our road. And then what did you say about the electric cars and the plug-in options, or did I?
So two things. One that you commented on, which I like to talk on and kind of expand on how Rick's response on the solar and the roofs we have proposed. The TPO roofing material that we're proposing now actually is better warranty-wise than what would be on a pitched roof. And also in terms of mitigating the heat island effect, that is a white TPO that's on the flat roofs, whereas any other material on a pitched roof would be darker and actually contribute to that, which is negative, which is another reason we are proposing this current design. And Rick was making the comment about the outlets being in the garages of the mansion-style buildings. So this image here, this image, and that one of the apartments. Because each unit's garage has an outlet, if they have a car they need to plug in, they'll be able to do so.
8 car, singular.
Yes, one per garage.
One per garage. And how, I know that's the way of the future, like it or not, it's coming, and I would think that, I know that none of this is cheap, and none of this is affordable housing by definition. But is that the trend you're seeing with housing of this caliber and housing of these rents, that these garages would have one outlet, or is it kind of a trend across the nation that there are more outlets because more of these people who can afford these things will be having more electric cars? And then is there a way to add them retrofit down the road?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'll kind of try to hit on all of that. It is a trend we are seeing, and I think that kind of ties into your retrofit question. Typically what we see, I think this is unique in the fact that we do have, the Leawood Development Code does have, the requirement of one stall covered and attached per unit. So by default, every single unit has at least one spot to charge their vehicle. And some of these slab-on-grade buildings, they have 12 or 14 units, and there's 16 garages per building. So some residents will have a 2-car garage, and each of those garages does have an outlet, just to be clear.
Help you?
Sure.
Let me clarify, because I think there might be a misunderstanding here. Here's a side view, just like at the other mansion-style buildings. These are 1-car garages. You can see here. I hope everybody can see this. 1-car garage for 1 unit. It's all the cars you can put in there's 1 car, and so it has a electrical plug in it. Some of the garages, some of the buildings have 16, or I guess now it's going to go to 15 because of the storm rooms. But all 15 garages will have plugs.
So, and you're right, I wasn't clear on that. So I was thinking the bigger buildings were going to have this. So
will they. Here I gotta go slow. No, this is the next one. Yeah, they're right there. You up one. They're right there.
So
you can see the side of the bigger buildings. They have garages. Now, so they'll have the same thing. The brownstones and the twin villas and the single family will have double car garages, so they'll have plenty of power for electricity.
And they'll be pre-wired for that, or that is up to
Well,
Mr.
just
Robbins?
electricity. You don't need to do anything more than just have power in the garage.
It's a certain plug, a certain kind of plug. It's not a refrigerator plug, though. I mean, those, right? I mean, it takes a certain special outlet.
Voltage.
A certain voltage and a certain, I've seen them, I mean.
Right. You have it in 110 and 220. So some cars are taking 220, some take 110. We'll have the power available for them.
But it's a funny outlet. It's
That's
not
the
a
220s.
Charging station?
It's the charging station. You plug the charging station into the outlet.
So when you say plug the charging unit into the outlet, that is you're saying that the resident will buy that charging station to plug in?
Because each one's different for each car. A Porsche doesn't match a Tesla nor a Volt. They're all different, but they all plug into either 220 or 110, and they all take 110. Some charge better off 220. Some take, the Volts won't take 220, they only take 110. So it's just all different. That's one of the problems. There's a lot of.
You're saying every stall will be able to be an electric?
Every garage will have it, yeah.
And
So-
every garage will have, if it's a two-car garage, each of them could charge?
Yeah?
Okay, thank you.
So every garage is going to get has going to have electricity.
Right.
So that's different than that you're going to provide charging stations. You're providing electricity.
I don't ever provide a charging station because every car comes with its own charging station. You plug into the outlet, and it's either 220 or 110. And am I
So-
misstating that? Okay, that's what we provide. The car comes with its each charger. A Tesla is very different from a Volt or for the Ford or whatever brand. So they all have, each car comes with its own charging station, and then it plugs one into the outlet and one into the car.
So what you're providing are not charging stations. What you're providing is just electricity in your garages that will accommodate the individual charging station. So it's a misnomer to say you're providing charging stations. You're providing
I never said
electrical
that.
outlets.
That's exactly right. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
Okay, well, that's not what,
But at Park Place, they have charging stations.
Okay,
Right.
I think you're, okay, so now, I'm sorry, you've got outside charging stations at retail and commercial, you've got them out here, I believe even, where you swipe your credit card and you plug in. Those are different. We will have a few of those at the clubhouse. So if guests are staying, we will have places for guests to swipe their cards and pay for electricity on that. That's how they're all done, those charging stations.
right, like Park Place garages, for example, have charging stations. You know, Cameron Court, Cameron Court, is that what you call it?
Camelot.
Camelot. Camelot Court has a charging station. So you have charging stations and,
You can't, we're just supplying electricity for them. Each car will have its own charging station.
But in the bigger parking lots?
We'll have charging stations.
At the
For the public, the
clubhouse,
public ones will
a
have
charging
public,
station.
or the public ones will have public charging
And
stations.
the big apartment?
The individual apartment buildings, each garage will have access to its own electricity, just like you would in a house. You know, a house doesn't come with a charging station, it comes with electricity to the garage. So these are like homes, same thing.
thank you.
We have plenty of time for more council discussion, but I'd like to hear from the residents. Now it's going on 10 o'clock, and they're waiting. So if you will hold your questions, and we will certainly take them up as soon as we hear from the residents. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to call on, we have two that signed in to speak. And I'll call on the one who hasn't spoken yet tonight, ask you to come forward, state your name and address for the record. And if you could try to keep your comments to 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. Kathleen Kelly. Good evening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Could you state your address, please?
12800 Howe Drive, Leawood, Kansas, 66209.
Thank you.
I would like to give my input on the final plan that came before us. My prior remarks were mostly going to focus on traffic, but I'm returning to some other points. I hope everyone received a letter I sent this afternoon.
We did. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you very much. My first comment regards the architectural design changes that have, in my opinion, they render the plan inconsistent with the neighborhood properties to the north. And for that matter, to the south, I mean, because Mr. Otto's property of Milano is more traditional looking, or transitional, whatever we want to call that style. But the proposed all-contemporary design and accompanying design standards are really going to be a jarring sight in the heart of our residential neighborhood. You know, they are suited to where they're currently existing at I-35 and West 87th Street in Lenexa, but I think we have a cut and paste of that project and not anything that is distinctly Leawood. So previously, it was moderated somewhat by the more traditional styles of the mansion homes, and I personally assumed the single-family homes would follow that same style. I remember many requests from the mayor and residents referencing Meadowbrook. You know, bring us Meadowbrook. We want Meadowbrook. And Mr. Otto agreed, and he said, yeah, okay, I'll do what you want, you know. But now we have something entirely different. So I favor a more traditional style for the mansion homes and the single-family homes to provide more of a neighborhood feel and a less jarring transition from the neighborhood to the north. Second, I don't believe the final plan fulfills the 135th Street corridor mission. Gareth Matthews stated it so well in his letter to the council. You know, we had goals of becoming a more walkable and bikeable community, a magnet for people within and outside Leawood. I think the final plan falls short of this mission, but one thing I would like Mr. Otto to consider is that if we could introduce local retail like Kansas City companies, rather than the big chains I saw all over his website today, like Panda Express for one. I think that would help to moderate and maybe be a draw for some of the neighborhood. I realize we're not at the retail stage right now, but since I'm here, I will add that input. Inspiration, let's call it. I am concerned about the mature treescape being erased. And my final remarks have to do with traffic. I really had to revise them substantially because I want to thank the council for recognizing what residents felt was completely unfair to approve a development agreement this evening. Since January 3rd, we have relied on ongoing assurance from the council of the $200,000 traffic calming. We haven't pursued legal remedies that may have been available to us at the time, like appeals. That is the harm to residents. We had a promise. We don't know all the ins and outs, but we thought, and we're told frequently, that that was secured. Regarding engineers, I have great respect for engineers. I am married to one, but it is a very large field with different areas of expertise, and I think the project would greatly benefit from a traffic engineer who has years of experience in this type of project. Regarding the cost estimates, with all respect to David Lay, it's very difficult for me to understand how in 2019, I believe, perhaps 2018, at a Public Works Committee meeting, 4 devices on 97th Street were estimated at $400,000. I should say 4 potential devices. But $30,000 can achieve a sustainable, workable, successful result on the long street of 132nd and High Drive. I understand there may be some professional costs in that figure, but it's a pretty big divide. My final comment has to do with a comment made by Mr. Otto to the Planning Commission on October 11th. It's apparent that Mr. Otto has a gross misunderstanding of the actual traffic situation in the area and on 132nd and High Drive. He egregiously understated the peak traffic on that street at 40 times of the number that's in the public record by David Lay at the January 3rd meeting. 4 per peak hour instead of 165 per peak hour. So I would urge Mr. Otto to get a handle on what the traffic situation is. That is why I would have preferred a denial at the January 3rd meeting, because to me it's irresponsible to double the population of the area when we have traffic issues which are extremely difficult to solve. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kelly. Rachel Rubin.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief since I spoke for a long time previously. I wanted to thank you for listening. Those that voted no.
Could you state your address
Rachel
one more
Rubin,
time?
sure,
Please.
3105 West 132nd Street.
Thank you.
Sure. Just so I wanted to thank you for listening regarding the traffic calming. Regarding the January 3rd meeting, we were shown a video over and over and over of Cameron's Court and how beautiful it was going to be. And Mr. Odo meticulously went through the 4 different styles that were going to be within Cameron's Court. And he went over and over and over, and actually we were like, okay, we've seen the video. But one of the styles was the mansion style, and it's the more traditional style with a pitched roof and stone. And the reason this is important is because it goes to the golden criteria. It goes actually back to the rezoning application that was approved, and you have to satisfy the golden criteria. One of the golden criteria is, how does this development fit within the existing neighborhoods? The existing neighborhoods are traditional. So you have Waterford, Wilshire Place, you have Tuscany, to the south, they're traditional. And it was very important in this development that was contemporary, and a lot of us didn't like that. We didn't like the contemporary look of it. But you had the modifying influence of the mansion style. So I can't express to you how important that was. And at the time, Mr. Odo thought it was very important because he showed us the video of the 4 styles in the 4 neighborhoods many times. Flat roofs, I know, are less expensive. They're just less expensive, but they have more maintenance problems down the road. So maybe it's money saved initially, but in the future, there's going to be more maintenance issues with flat roofs, is my understanding. Now, maybe I'm incorrect about that, but that's my understanding. The pitched roofs have a better maintenance rate, or less maintenance is required in the future. Regarding the berming, I mean, this is something, we had resident meetings with the city and Mr. Odo and his team, and I asked him over and over, we want the berms on 133rd to match the berms on 133rd and Wilshire Place. We want the berm to be like analogous, so that we have a nice berm, to cover the development, so we don't have to look at, apartment buildings. He promised us there's going to be beautiful berming, heavy trees. I can't find the quote right now, but I will find the quote for the next time of how high he said the berm was going to be. But again, the word heavy was used over and over. So I don't think a 3-foot berm, with all due respect, is heavy. I don't think it's large. I don't think it's tall. It doesn't correspond to 133rd and Wilshire Place, which has 6 to 8 foot berms. And also Gezer Park, I think Gezer Park was mentioned. Beautiful berming, but the park is beautiful, and it really does, it shelters the Waterford residents who live over there. It shelters them from, development on 133rd. It does its job. A berm that's 3 feet cannot do that. It just can't. The other thing that I find a little frustrating is like, things are said at the time, but they're not followed through upon. And so this, again, with the berming, you know, we were promised heavy berming. So I would appreciate if that would be changed. And I think that's something that should be important. It's a long-term issue for the city. Let's see. I think that's all I have to say at this time. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin. That concludes our citizens that signed in to speak, so we'll go back to more questions for the developer. Ms. Fella.
This is actually a question for Mark. What is the title of the development at State Line and 89th?
I want to say it's Village East.
That's what I heard too. So I think that really somebody needs to figure that out because it's going to be very confusing if we have a Village East at 89th and an East Village at 134th.
I know
So-
it has Village. I didn't hear it being Village East. Leawood Village.
Oh, the one that Doug Weltner is
Weltner?
doing up at 89th and State Line. Because you have Village of Leawood that's
Right.
just to the west. And then I think he had like, I want to say East Village because it was getting very confusing.
Yeah.
And then here,
Really?
it was East
Yes.
Village, so it was like a flip of the.
It was
of
first
words.
mentioned to me by our former head of economic development, Kevin mentioned that. So he says, I don't know how we're going to handle it.
Really?
Yeah. So if we
There's a
can,
lot of them that are using the same terms.
so if we can just really sort that out, that will be really a benefit to all the residents and everyone else, the post services, FedEx. I mean, it's
Well,
like,
there's a big project downtown I know of that is called East Village.
yeah, and I mean, if you've ever been in Old Leawood trying to find Ensley and Belinder as they meander around, it's just, yeah. Okay, and there's multiple Cherokees, places, boulevards, I mean, it's just, so one of the things that I will thank Ms. Rubin for helping me understand what I think is the biggest issue here when we go back to the traffic. What I saw that the 30,000 for tonight was about the existing traffic. And I think when you're looking at what might come about 5 years of the entirety project, and you have a letter of credit for that, I think that's where the delta comes from my understanding. There isn't a need for $200,000 for the existing, not development-related traffic issue that neighbors have been talking about for multiple years, and is just aggravated by their fear of what's going to happen. But if we're going to look at what we're going to try to address with the change in traffic, will there be any change of traffic? Then I think you need to make that a separate thing that talks about what would be a line of credit to address potential issues that would come up from the traffic from this development when fully completed over the next 5 years. And I think that when we get them smushed together is the challenge, because the first one doesn't require the extra dollars associated, and the latter requires a longer time frame for it to be covered. So I think we really need to sort out how that gets handled, and I would love to have the developer address that so that.
Normally, on commercial developments that are causing traffic, we don't require posting a letter of credit to see how traffic pans out. Normally, we rely on traffic studies and traffic engineers to use the standards that they have to determine how many trips and what sort of change in the number of trips there will be.
And that's fine. And whatever it is, I think we need to separate what is the traffic concerns that are not related. They're here today, and the development hasn't started.
I think that has occurred in the Public Works memo.
I know, but the
that's already occurred.
$200,000 was for a 5-year line of credit. And to me, that speaks to the worries of what's going to be. And either we address those worries or we get that line of credit. And I think if we could separate those 2 points in time and those 2 different traffics, then we will have a better hope, I think, of getting to the best possible outcome when the final plan comes.
Were there other questions? Mr. Sippel and Ms. Larson.
Go ahead, you go ahead first.
I'll keep mine brief since we're past the 10 o'clock hour. Just a few comments for when this comes before us again for final approval. 3 different comments. The sidewalks. I may be in the minority, but I prefer the 6-foot sidewalks throughout the neighborhood as was included in the preliminary plan. We're wanting to focus on walkability, accessibility, community interaction, bikeability. The point was made that at Regents Park and 135 across the street, there are 5-foot sidewalks, but the density over there is much less. They have 276 total units, 81 in Regents Park, 195 in 135, for a total of 276. What we have in East Village, the apartments alone were 648. Phase 2 itself has 345 apartments. So it's just a greater density, a lot of people in a smaller area. I think the 6-foot sidewalks would be of benefit. Second point, the architecture. I agree with staff. I think that Mark Klein eloquently said it in his comments included in the packet. For the mansion-style buildings, the pitched roof, it's a more expensive look. It helps break up all that contemporary. I'm not a huge fan of the style. It does just help soften it up and provides a more traditional residential architectural style. And I'm not worried about the mansion-style heights as they impact the neighborhood to the north. What I'm worried about is the heights of the 4-story apartment buildings. So to me, the savings in the height, the flat versus the sloped roof is really not significant. And then the last, I agree, the 3-foot berm seems inadequate, and I think for a really polished look, the berms should match on both sides of 133rd Street. If we have a 6-foot berm to the north, then I'd like to see a 6-foot berm to the south as we're driving down that street. I had one question. The picture of the trees that are on the 3-foot berm shows kind of mature trees. I wanted to know what age those trees are that are depicted.
I would imagine that's about a 10-year growth in there.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, you don't put in mature trees, but that will be mature.
Okay.
And as far as the berms go, anytime you raise the berm, you put a bigger V in that backyard, because
Right.
to the point where you ruin the backyard. With an RP2 type single family there, the higher that berms is, that those backyards are shorter, so we don't have the space, and the height of the house is set by the street, so we're very limited. And most of those are uphill anyway, so they're set, most of it's set above, or we have embankment. We are working to see if we can get any more height, but you end up doing damage to the backyard of the new homes, and I don't think Jeff Robinson, we talked to him about that, if he wants to,
Could
hurt the
the
value of this.
installation of some drainage measures incorporated at the base of the berm help with that issue?
I don't think so. We tried looking at all that the best we could, because we also have to run the drainage from west to east down there as well. So we're getting into the physics of the land, and and David Lay's looked at that too, and we're all in agreement that if you do any higher, you start doing damage, hurting the values of the homes that we're trying to build. We still want to have very nice homes there. So that's one of the reasons why we've got a lot of shrubs running down there as well to help offset some of that, so it helps. And your staff said it's the most intensive landscaping they've seen. So I do believe we're going above and beyond.
Yeah, I appreciate the landscaping, but it still doesn't quite, fill the gap with the different heights of the berms. So that's just my thought as moving forward, as you're looking at these plans and before it comes back. I'm just sharing my opinion now.
Mr. Sippel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to echo what Mary said about the 6-foot berms. I think a certain amount of symmetry on the north side and the south side is important. I think the berm on the north side of 133rd really shields the dwelling units there from the street, and that's the same look I'd like to see on the south side. There has to be a way around that with drainage and so forth. So I would welcome some alternatives there. I also like the traditional style of some of these multifamily units that you've got in Villa Milano. I think going to the flat roofs is probably economical. It might be modern, but the neighbors have substantial investments in their homes and in that neighborhood, and they're comfortable with the look of that neighborhood. And if there'd be a way, maybe you could put some of the traditional style slope roof buildings in there and some flat ones, maybe some of these flat rooms closer to 135th Street, and some traditional styles closer to 133rd Street would be an option that the neighbors might be interested in. Could you clarify, looking at the single family and the twin villas and the other units, which ones are for purchase and which ones are for rent? I'm still a little confused on that.
Let me pull this up. Can everybody see this slide here?
Yep.
Okay. So you've got single family all the way along here, about 2/3 of the way down, and the single family here, that's all for sale.
Right.
You also have twin villas over here. They'll be buffering 133rd, and they're also all for sale.
Right.
In addition to the brownstones here and the brownstones here. I will tell you, I disagree with it's an expense issue. It's a look issue. I can get a 60 mil TPO roof instead of a 40-year, and I typically get 15 to 20-year warranties versus a 3-year. So, and there's plenty of people that can repair these roofs. They're much easier to work with for repair purposes. So that is, it's just a pure look. The expense is the same from a standard roof, not asphalt or not tile or whatever, but it's a look that we feel is very buffered from 133rd by the twin villas and the single family, that they won't be able to see much there, if anything. So we're trying to meet the corridor plan and have a cohesive plan as we requested beforehand.
Okay, I had one more question. Clarify High Drive. Is that going to be finished during Phase 1 and Phase 2, all the way to 135th Street, so construction traffic can exit on 135th?
Phase 1 will
Right.
consist of this street going all the way across east
Right.
and west with that. We'll have to exit out Pawnee and go south to 135th. Phase 2 will consist of building out Chadwick Park and the drive around Chadwick and High Drive from 133rd Terrace or 134th Street, whatever that is, all the way down to 135th. So we'll build this portion, the majority of it, when we build out these homes through there.
And Chadwick will go to 135th as well?
Yes,
In part of the Phase 1 and Phase 2?
when Phase 2 goes
And
in.
you said that was going to be 2 years, maybe 3 years to get Phase 1 and Phase 2 in the ground?
To be completed, it's a
Yeah.
two, you're right, it takes about, I'll go in with, you do the infrastructure first. As I think the fire codes here require us to put it in the streets or top coat them or whatever, but but when we break ground, before we break ground on 2, and I say before, the first thing that goes in is the infrastructure, underground utilities, and the basic streets. And we'll have, so that we can use 135th while we're building all of Phase 2 and the rest of it.
Thank you, Rick. One more final comment of mine. There's a memo circulated around by one of the homeowners neighboring to the north. He did a wonderful job of talking about the trees that currently exist on your property on Chadwick. There's an old farmstead there, and there's a lot of mature trees. It would be a wonderful gesture if you could do something with those, relatively high caliper trees, just save them. But I'm on the Sustainability Committee, and that kind of thing is a hot button for us, but he made a very good point of it. It's a shame that we'd have to bulldoze those and then plant 2-inch trees. Just a personal reflection.
I agree, and if you remember on one of the several plans I submitted, I had those all saved, and we completely went around those trees. And this was part of why I was afraid of going to the grid system, and is that those are going to end up most of them are going to be removed. So that was one of my fears I brought up at the time. So we will obviously save what we can, but the grid system kind of takes out some of these trees that I wanted to save. That's why I had a plan that bypassed all of those. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff I've been doing since day one is playing the whack-a-mole situation. I want to please this person, I want to please this, and I want to please this. And I end up still not pleasing anybody, but I do have a plan here that meets LDO, that meets all the codes, and is very feasible and workable. So, we will work with everybody all we can. But we're, being after 3 years of doing this, we've tweaked and pushed it a lot, and it's difficult.
Thank you. That's
Ms.
all.
Harrison.
Thank you. I think I have 2 things I want to comment about. The first is garages. I think that I've become a little bit more confused about where people are parking this evening than I thought I was before. I think in Leawood, you would agree that we like our covered parking and we like our cars to be inside because, ice and snow. I'm looking at these pictures, and help me understand, or maybe go to your picture where you have all 6 of your kinds of units in one place, so we can kind of go one by one on garages, covered, enclosed, number. If you have a 2-bedroom unit, maybe your 12-unit walk-up, if you have a 2-bedroom unit, do you get 2 enclosed spaces, or do you have to park one of those outside? If I'm buying a 2-bedroom unit.
Buying a 2-bedroom unit, or you mean the twin villas in the brownstones?
You call them what you
Okay.
want. I'm going to simplify and call them 2-bedroom units. If I am owning a
If you're owning-
mortgage, me and the bank,
Everything for ownership, the single family, the twin villas, and the brownstones all have 2-car garages.
2-bedroom, 2-car garages.
They have 2-car garages. The bedroom sizes are between
Okay.
2,
Okay.
3, and
2-car
possibly
garage.
4 on the
Hard
single
for me to
families.
tell
Those
on
are
all of
the
these.
those are the mansion-style apartments.
Well, I mean, all of these.
Right,
Hard for
I
me to
get it.
tell what's got 2, because this kind of looks like a 2-car 2 cars, but
That's
that's
the
2
intention. That's
units,
why
so
it's
that's a
made
little
to look like the
confusing.
homes.
And since most of the people that have a 2-bedroom unit now, let me go to the rentals, 2-bedroom unit, very well may be Mr. and Mrs. John and Jane Smith, 2 cars. You're telling me they get 1 car covered inside, the other is in their driveway, or do they have to park down the street at some carport, or are they allowed to park in their driveway?
Okay, this is gonna be a tough one to blow up on this map, but I will do my best. You can take it here. Can you see this here?
Yep,
And you
that's
see
on-street
here
cluster parking, I
and
call that.
here, and every building has, we average, by the way, 1.2 cars per unit is what we see as the average.
What does a .2 car look like to you?
Very few people have more than 1 car. And so 1.2 is usually enough
My
coverage.
point is you either have 1 or 2, right?
I know.
You don't have 1.2.
I understand that, but that's why we have so much parking out on the street, which is the code, the LDO, which is the code, the MXD, same as everybody else. No, go ahead, go ahead.
So to probably answer the question is, per the Leawood Development Ordinance, we have a minimum of 1 covered and attached garage stall per unit. Obviously, because the slab-on-grade 12 and 14-unit buildings have 16 garage stalls, there are several of the units that would have more than 1 stall. I don't know off the top of my head if it's a perfect ratio of 2 for a 2-bedroom or 1 for a 1-bedroom, but when we come back, we can definitely have that math for you. I don't think it is, but.
But these folks in a 12-unit walkout front, they're allowed to park in these driveways if they live in this unit with this garage door. They can keep a car out here 24/7 in this driveway, or do they have to park down the street?
No, they can park behind their own garage. They can't park behind their neighbor's garage for the
Hold on.
obvious reasons.
Right here, yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to throw this in as a...
That parking, we're not even counting as additional parking stalls, by the way.
I
When you
know,
park
I'm
behind
just-
your garage, we
I
don't
know.
count that as a stall.
Right. Okay. Leasing question, would this be appropriate? Since we don't have a lot of multifamily housing in Leawood, a leasing question. Do you have, or does our LDO, again, could be a staff question, have a limit to the number of people that can live in an apartment?
I'm going to refer that
Is
one
that
to
a,
the
is
city.
that a city question, Mark? I ask this because I've recently learned that 2 bedrooms can sometimes mean a family of 4 or 5. Do we have rules about that, Mark?
Within, for instance, attached units, RP3 has a limit of 4 units per building. Within RP4, you have a limit of 12 units per building.
Talking about human beings living in
Human
the-
beings.
Humans.
No, we don't. We have a definition of family, but not as far as the
But
number.
you can't have multiple families
No, not multiple families,
in a
but
unit.
But you
But
can have
if
a
you have a
family of
large family,
12,
you
or you
can-
can have a family of 14, and you don't have to have so many bedrooms.
right.
You could have a family of 5 in a 2-bedroom apartment,
Or in a 2-bedroom house.
or in a 2-bedroom villa, or in a 2-bedroom
Yeah, we don't-
whatever.
We don't have anything that says
Okay.
that number of people per
I've
bedroom.
recently learned that that's a thing in some new apartments in Prairie Village, and I didn't know that that was a thing. So this was eye-opening to me.
And Ms. Harris, I believe that's a federal law that we can't, and I'm going to
Fair
refer
housing or
that-
something like
Yeah,
that?
that we can't limit a family to how many people there are in there. We can limit the number of non-family members,
Mm-hmm.
and we try doing that. But we do find that that's usually the places that are having really cheap rents.
Oh, no.
C and D class apartments. When you're paying a 2-bedroom starting at $2,400, there's cheaper rent to go to, and that's,
Well,
Now, we
I've
will
just-
have some of these.
There are examples. So
Yeah.
I know it's not what we expect, and I know this isn't a conversation about how many people are actually going to be in this development, but I was shocked to learn that in Meadowbrook, that there are situations where, surprise, surprise, it's not 2 people in a 2-bedroom, it's 5 in a 2-bedroom. So
I haven't run across that in any of our communities in the 35 years I've been doing this. It's not in any of ours. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, I haven't run across it.
Okay. Thank you.
I have just a couple of questions. If you could put up the elevation of the single-family home, and I'm glad the builder is here this evening, but I thought I heard you say they would be at around a $1.2 million price point. Did I hear that correctly?
That's what, I'm gonna let Jeff come up and answer that one.
And if Mr. Robinson would like to answer, that'd be fine. I also want to have an idea of square footage of those single-family, because I didn't read that anywhere, or I may have missed it, but I didn't see it.
Picture of the, other than right here in the middle.
It's right in the middle, the square right in the middle, I believe.
I'm Jeff Robinson. Address is 8325 Monticello, Shawnee, Kansas, 66227. So your question is the square footage of the single family would be one question?
What will be the average square footage and the average price point of these single-family homes?
So the final plans have not been designed. We tend to think of, it depend on the style, but if we think about the main floor, they wouldn't be any smaller than about 1,800 feet on the main floor, and they would probably range up to probably as big as 3,000 or 3,200 feet, I would say, on the main floor. And then they could either potentially go up or down with as much as 1,000 to 1,500 feet, depending on how big. Yeah.
And price point?
Kind of speculation at this point, isn't it? So houses, I don't know. Do you want me to speculate, Rick? I don't know that that's a fair question. Today, even just a medium-sized house, starts at $800 to $1 million. So these could be 800,000 to $1.5 million. I would, if I had to guess, but
They're going
gosh.
to be four-sided finish, and what I mean by that is we'll have stucco stone. We're not doing lap board on them, so it's an upgrade from even the community. I believe even to the north they allowed lap siding or lap board on the back of those, and I could be wrong on it, but it'd be four-sided construction, which typically adds to the cost.
And I did read, I thought, that these were going to be custom homes. I mean, you might have a plan, but people can customize these homes. They're not all, I guess the point I'm getting at, you're not going to have every one of your single-family homes look like this photo.
No.
This is going to be a unique, like
unique.
any other neighborhood.
Right.
They're going to have unique styles and. Is that correct to
Yeah,
your opinion
that's a
as well?
concept. That's just a concept rendering
For one home?
for one home.
All right.
And
Yeah,
each one of
so-
those buildings will come forward to staff for approval as we do that. They'll go through the design review committee and then go to staff for approval to get building permits. I believe that's how you do single family, is that right?
Single family typically goes to the building department is because they're custom and as long as they meet the building code.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. That's good to know. My other question, and maybe this is for Mr. Reuter, it's about the mansion-style apartments and their flat roof. If there's any concern on drainage on is there enough of a slope? I see a small, I think I read 3.5% maybe on the two ends. Is there any concern? Because one of the residents brought up maintenance, and I have heard of maintenance issues on flat roofs.
Yeah, and so there's, on the mansion-style buildings, you can kind of tell there's two different slopes. A flat roof obviously is not perfectly flat because we do drain them. So there's 3% on the pitched elements. On the actual flat areas behind the parapets, those are typically sloped at 1/4 inch per foot towards obviously the drains, and that is to prevent ponding, and then any other obstructions on the roof, whether it be parapet returns, et cetera, have crickets that are sloped a little bit more dramatically at 1/2 inch per foot to prevent any drainage issues.
Okay, that's good to hear too. thank you for that. Ms. Phillip?
I just wanted to share that if any of my fellow council members would like to come down to Old Leawood, where we don't have, HOA kind of design criteria that forced folks to continue to do the 1.5-story cottage deals, I would tell you that this modern look is definitely being chosen for infill and remodeling, and it's interdispersed with the classic look that you think of in Old Leawood. So I do sense that this is in fact what younger folks are looking for, because that's what they like. And I welcome you to come down to Old Leawood, and I'll drive you in a 3-block area, and you get to see all of the infill. One of the strangest ones that's ever been done. It's kind of a half and half deal. So I mean, people are bringing contemporary home into Old Leawood.
I think there's been a lot of good discussion. Oh, Mr. Rawlings?
Thank you. This is a question, I think, for two people, the builder, Mr. Robinson, and then about the berms. Is there a standard? We're talking about 6-foot berms along 133rd and I know that the higher the berm, the worse the water runoff is. I've had experience with that being on the public works. I hear it all the time. So, when we talked about the berms, I noticed that Mr. Robertson kind of squiggled his face a little bit about the backyards and what people want, So, if the berms are to be considered and being higher, what is that going to do to the backyards, to the twin villas, and to the backyards of the single-family homes in relation to the look and the markability and that kind of thing?
Yeah, if we have the same amount of space and we have a taller berm, it's going to come back, it kind of feathers back into the backyard, so it takes up backyard space. So, of course, taller would be better until it takes away from backyard space. So there's kind of a, I don't know, kind of the best of, with the amount of space that is allotted for the berm and the backyard. They've designed, I think, the berm at 3 feet tall, so with lots of nice trees and planting.
What do you see? The taller the berm is going to require some additional drainage, I guess, for to slope it off.
Well,
there was a comment about drainage needed to go to the east.
Yeah, there's an engineered drainage area that I believe runs from the west all the way to the east. It's kind of at the very back of the yard.
There is. Yeah. Can I show you on this picture here? I don't know where my mouse is. Where's, page up. I'll show you what happens. Because this, where's the mouse? I don't know what happened to it here. Maybe I can just point to over here if you don't mind, Mr. Rollins. If I can twist this.
I think you're going to have to hold the handheld microphone if you walk away.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay. Since the mouse isn't working, we'll try doing this. As you can see, this is, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. So as you increase this berm, you put a bigger pitch into this backyard, causing drainage issues for this house, because it still has to run away so far, and we have to take it from west to east. This one here is showing a 4-foot berm behind the single family. The biggest we can get behind the walkouts on the twin villas was 3 foot. So we have a physics issue here that we've been fighting with since day one when we put the double row like this. So if you increase that any higher, you're going to have a non-sellable backyard. I mean, how would you want to have a valley in your backyard instead of a backyard you can use? And that's what you have. And I don't want to hurt the value of these very nice homes that doesn't solve a problem. It actually creates a problem. So, he's going to have a harder time selling homes that don't have a usable backyard, because that's the number one thing people want to do. And believe it or not, on these homes, we want more direct walkout from the kitchen straight on out, because that was a new thing, that since these are really going to be marketed to empty nesters, then the kitchen to the backyard, and you probably know that you're in the business of selling these things, they don't want the walkouts anymore. That's for the families, but for the empty nesters, and I found it with myself, we just rather go right on out the backyard. And if you increase this, I can't stress this enough, you start seeing what it does to this backyard. It makes it unusable. So let's not hurt this development for something that's a perceived improvement for somebody else, which it really isn't.
Are fences allowed?
You answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will fences be allowed?
We will have, since we're doing maintenance provided, most maintenance provided communities don't allow fences because we can't cut the grass. So
Some do.
some do.
Some do. And they go right through the gate.
Gates through the, okay. Right now, we may have them along the perimeter, and that's something we probably haven't gotten that far. I don't need this too. I mean, if it's my preference, I'd say no, I'd rather not have gates, but that's something that Jeff and I will work out together that we'd like to, decide. I mean, it's something that I'm not going to say no, I'm not going to allow them if that's something you insist on. On the other hand, my preference is not to have them, except for along the perimeters, like 133rd, that area.
Okay, we've heard from council. We've heard your thoughts. Are you wanting to talk again,
Yes, sorry.
Ms. Harrison?
Sorry. I didn't actually
We
get
hope-
my number 2 in earlier because I veered off into tenancy, and I shouldn't have.
All right.
I'll be brief.
Okay, we're counting on that.
You've heard it from several of us tonight, and I want to add to that so that you're counting that it is at least 4 people who have said that the mansion style, our preference is the more traditional look. I am a little bit frustrated that I think this is at least the 3rd, possibly the 4th iteration of what I thought this community was going to look like. 2 of them, I think, came to us, they were out there on the internet and rumored before we ever saw a first preliminary plan, and they kept getting better. From the one that was out there with early talks with the residents a year and a half or 2 ago to the one that came to us in January, I thought that looked great. And if I'm going to look at it for the next 50 years, I thought that looked great. And I'm disappointed that it's changed so much to such a contemporary, and that you keep saying we wanted a more cohesive look and a compatible look. I don't recall that being a directive that we gave to people in the building design conversations. So the mansion style, and if the whole community could have a more traditional look, I would be thrilled. There are so many things about this project that I like. I wish I liked the main design on the elevations. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the developers heard from all of you and from some of the residents, and certainly beyond the residents that spoke tonight, we've had numerous emails, and all of those have been given to the developers. So he's had all that communication. So at this point, and thank you all for your feedback, and at this point, I would like to entertain a motion for a remand.
So moved.
For the reasons stated. A motion from Ms. Fella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Rawlings. Any further discussion? The remand will be the second Tuesday of December to the Planning Commission, Mr. Klein?
Yes, I believe it's December 13th.
December 13th. And then is there an anticipated date that it will be back in front of the City Council?
I think it would be January 3rd, ironically, because I think New Year's falls on a Sunday, and so we have the Monday off, and so.
But if that date didn't work, we could move it to the second meeting
Yes.
in January.
Yes.
Yes, because we might not even have a full house. That's another thing that happens around New Year's. So, Yeah, that's probably something important that we'll ask our city clerk to ascertain, whether we'll have full attendance. Okay. All right, if there's no further comment or discussion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, it's approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Odo and team.
Are we to keep this wad of material for the next time, or?
Well, I intend to, because it's written all over.
Yeah, I got my parts that I've written all over, but.
I would suggest you do it, but knowing our staff, they'll probably want to ensure. Some of you, though, are just doing electronic and not having paper.
We're all doing it paper.
You're all doing paper? Oh,
Yeah, we tried it.
wow.
Too much.
I
Wouldn't download it.
stand corrected. I thought I had some green people up here.
We tried.
Well, you have green people, but
tried.
it's a lot to look at on a computer.
It is.
I tried to download
No, I
it.
totally, I
Yeah.
couldn't do it.
You can't even
Couldn't, yeah,
download
my
it.
screen went blank at home with a
It
little
broke the
unhappy
computer.
face on it.
It broke the computer. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ruder, too, as well.
Maybe he could just make copies of the pages that change, like a code revision.
We'll go now to the mayor's report, and I would like to say appreciation goes to Vivian Swafford, who is the founder of the Taiwan America Friendship Association, who provided the lovely Mandarin calligraphy gifts for each of you. That's what you have in front of you. So we thank her for that. Overland Park Mayor Kurt Skoog hosted the November Council of Mayors meeting at the Matt Ross Community Center this past week, and I'd like you to please add Wednesday, December 7th to your calendar for the Council of Mayors December Social. It's going to be held this year at the 1900 building, and it will not involve a sit-down dinner, which I thought you'd all be happy to hear. It's going to be a social reception. And then finally, tomorrow is Election Day. I want to wish all the candidates good luck and remind you to vote.
What's your
Don't
first
forget
hint?
to vote. And that concludes my mayor's report. We have no council members' report this evening. Ms. Bennett, as our interim city administrator, do you have a report?
I didn't when I came into this, but I do now. The staff has asked the Parks and Recs Director and the Public Works Director if they could put their staff reports off to December 5th. They are currently on the agenda as 13A and B, and they think because of the late hour and the fact that there hasn't been a whole lot of change, and there will be more come the first meeting in December, that it might be a good idea to postpone those, although our HR Director will still come in and
Oh,
talk
he's
with
coming
us.
in on 13C.
On C, but A
So
and B.
A and B,
If that would be okay with the
it would
governing
certainly
body.
be welcomed by me. I think everybody is in favor of that.
I
So-
wanted to hear, I want to hear.
So, thank you for that, excellent. Now, do we, since we approved this agenda, do we need to move to 13 and have a motion to, or can we do it by consensus?
I think you can do this by consensus.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Going to staff report 13C, Nick Sanders, Director of Human Resources, report on parks and public works maintenance salary adjustments.
Thank
Good
you, Mayor.
evening.
Almost good morning. The other two are supposed to be behind me to show that they're in support of this as well. But before you, as I've mentioned, I believe it was in August, when we did the public safety compensation adjustments and changes, we're bringing back the maintenance conversation. One of those things that we've figured out is that we are drastically behind in the maintenance division as well. As mentioned back then, we've done some conversations that have happened over the last several months. And before you is some adjustments that we are in agreement with on the maintenance side. We are moving those positions, proposed to moving those positions from an entry level of $15.16 an hour to $20.17 an hour. We believe that that will give us a market ability to give a lot more applicants. Right now, as you will probably can tell, we actually did not, and maybe I think Pelger's back in the back, if we can switch to the Elmo. Chris Worker Magic.
We've got it
So,
here, haven't
actually, that's the wrong one, sorry. It
Is this the same thing we have?
It is not. This is the
No.
latest, greatest, I wanted to give you
Oh.
a comparison
Okay.
of what we're looking at, total dollar amounts. So as you can see here before you, one of our comparators, we've looked at a lot of other local agencies. The one that's closest to that 2017 proposed amount is the city of Prairie Village. $19 and, let's see here, 44 cents. They just went through and implemented a market survey. They're at 65% of the market average. What that means is that they are not leading the market, they are not lagging the market, they're not meeting the market, they're 65% right there, so a little bit above. We believe that we are better than that. And so that's why we came in at a $20. There are 3 other agencies that are on there that are denoted by an asterisk that are in the middle of a market survey as well, similar to what we did the police and fire. They have not released those results. I do have it on good word that the city of Shawnee is not going to be anywhere close to 19. They're actually going to be just slightly under 19, but that's been about 3 weeks ago, and they may have updated that and changed that, so I do want to be a matter of full disclosure. One thing I will tell you is we also are competing within this range of pay with other entities such as Menards, Quick Trip, FedEx, things that you have listed here for different positions, and you can see as a comparison for part-time positions, these are the rates of pays that we're competing with, so that to get those people in the door with the expectations to do the jobs we do, to plow the snow we do, to pour concrete, to lay asphalt, to cut grass in the temperatures, do the things that we do, we got to make it sure that they want to come to work here. Not only is it for compensation, but for the benefits we provide, and that's why we came up with the $20.17, which is right about $42,000 a year. And that's on the Parks and Public Works side.
And are there benefits with these positions?
Yes, they are all benefits eligible, just like every other position in the city.
And our benefits, as I recall, are very, very nice and
Yes.
substantial benefits.
Yes.
So we could beat FedEx and Quick Trip and Menards, perhaps. in our
We are
benefit.
competitive. They do offer, the private sector does offer benefits that we cannot, stock ownership, things of that nature. They do, a lot of other agencies will have some benefits that we don't. We haven't maintained competitiveness, so some other agencies may have a greater amount of education reimbursement, but we do beat those agencies with the amount of healthcare and the healthcare benefits we provide. So we balance as a competitiveness. We just don't necessarily beat every single one of them, but the ones that we feel matter, we beat them.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Nick, I see on the, on the budget line, it says see above, and I don't quite understand that, but has this been run by finance, or there's?
Yes.
We verified that it's in the budget and all that?
It will be absorbed within this year's budget. Obviously, it's the end of the year, and we are short-staffed, so that will help. There's a $300,000 implementation cost that are going to be across both Parks and Public Works in total. And those are existing staff members. Those existing staff members range from someone that started a month ago to someone that's been here for 30 years. So you have a broad gamut of compensation in which you're working with. One of the things that we want to keep in mind is that it is not reflected in the 2023 budget. It actually, a question did come up for next year, and it will be likely a budget adjustment that comes into play in 2023. The downside of that will be is we will probably not have a large adjustment for the budget because we will probably experience some attrition and shortages in staffing because of different things, whether people just don't want to work here.
Right.
Or we just can't find the people because other agencies or other people start to pay more money than what we're paying, things of that nature. So we will have a budget adjustment, but we will 2024 be able to adjust for these proposed amounts and move forward in that route.
Thank you.
Mr. Sipple.
Nick, how many open positions are we talking about that are going to get this adjustment?
Right now, we have 2 in parks, maintenance, and we have 4. Public Works is right now 4 actually open, will be 5 at the end of the year. And there's a rumor of another one, so 6. We're really struggling on the Public Works side. We actually have, our concrete crew is 3 down right now. We have 1 or 2 facilities and a fleet technician that we're going to be losing for retirement.
And this will make a difference.
We believe and we hope that it will make a difference in order for us to maintain competitiveness. I can't tell you that because that happens, it will get someone in there that will stay here forever.
Well, I'd be interested in recommending that maybe at the end of the first quarter of '23, you give us a status report as to whether or not this adjustment made a difference in your recruiting.
I'd be honored to.
Mr. Rawlings.
Nick, the two firefighters that came on board here recently, and we adjusted the fireman pay and the ranges, did that have a bearing on maybe helping recruit those two new firefighters? I know they had some experience and looking for more of an opportunity.
Yeah, I
Did that
think,
help?
I believe that process was kind of ongoing. They came on board because of a decision we made probably earlier due to some conversations. Traditionally, we've only brought in new firefighters. You started as a Fire 1 and you worked your way through Master 3. What we've started to do, which we are a little bit lagging the market in the sense, or we're late to the game, bringing in laterals. And so what they refer to as laterals, so we're bringing people in as, instead of firefighter 1s, we're bringing them as firefighter 3s and giving them experience and pay equal to that, what they bring on board here. Similar concepts are being applied both in Parks and Public Works as well. No different than if someone were to come in to work in my department. People want to be paid for the value that they bring. They don't want to just come in making the bare minimum as well. So changing that mindset is a little bit different. We're finding that we have, to speak on the fire department, we have, I believe, roughly 20 people we're going to interview for firefighter, 2 or 3 firefighter openings for the next process. So that's probably more in one process than we had in 3 processes combined in the last 3. So the dollar amounts and the rates of pay are changing. The people and the applicants we have, we're actually changing and allowing experienced firefighters to come here rather than us being a training ground and they going somewhere else. And so it does help, we believe, and it's also the opportunity for us to retain those people and keep that knowledge here and realize that the benefits are exactly what they retain here. They are keeping us here to the value of the organization and the culture.
Well, I'm a big supporter. If you've got to bring somebody in at a higher level because of their experience, you need to do that. So I think that's a good mindset change.
Ms. Kane.
I think this is great. I know, I imagine in conversations I've heard that, some of our workers like this drive a considerable distance, so with the cost of fuel and food and everything. So I think this is really going to help. My question is, I know we did fire, I know we did police, now we're doing this. Are we stopping here? Because I think I read somewhere recently that did PV not kind of do an overall staff kind of adjustment, like recently? Holistic, maybe that's not the word, it's not your HR wording. But I, for one, would like to say how much I encourage this, because we have such an extraordinary city, and we have, we have to pay our people what they're due, and we need to keep competitive. And for example, I just met Ricky Sanchez for the first time the other day, and then literally, I think it was the next day, I heard he was picked off by Kansas City Mo. I was like, oh, and it's happening, unfortunately. So I think, I just think that we need to look at it and, look at the overall budget and have a very comprehensive look at how we're paying all of our people. I applaud this start in the police and the fire, but I, for one, think that we really need to do a serious overall, all of Leawood look at this to stay competitive and be able to provide our people the service they,
Yeah, it's definitely something we can do. We've built all the programs we have and designed for that, ready to go. We do hear from time to time that people will come in, for example, to pick on Patty. She comes in and says, I can't find court clerks, and we go run some interference for it, and we say, we'll find out, well, we need to pay court clerks a little bit more, so we'll go after, we'll adjust some pays and things of that nature. It may not rise to this level of a $300,000 expense, things of that nature. A lot of that was handled internally, just kind of a one-off. But a holistic review, it will take some work, but I think I would agree that it does need to happen. Prairie Village, just knowing enough about it, is spent, I believe, about $1.7 million. And that's a holistic changeover, adjusting staff, and they did some, my opinion, some crazy things.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily to be what your liking is.
Crazy good, crazy bad?
They did some crazy things. They're expecting their people to be the maximum of the pay range within a certain about 10 years. It's almost guaranteed. And I don't want to be saying that that is the gospel, because I don't know the explicit, but I believe that is the case. So whether or not you are a great employee or you're a subpar, you're an average employee, you'll be at the maximum of your pay range.
Well, we have two things we want up here. We don't want to raise the mill levy. We want to keep that flat, but we want to pay our people well.
Right.
So we charge you with a lot of heavy lifting and work. And
Right.
we appreciate you being proactive and doing your good diligence on this.
Right, and so what we end up doing, we have no problem doing that. We talk to other agencies, City of Lenexa, City of Olathe, Shawnee is going through one right now to speak. Scott would always say, let them do the heavy lifting, and we can come in and figure out, let them do the work and say, okay, where they're at, and we can figure out what's gonna happen from there. Downside of that is we seem to sort of play this one-up game.
And again, I'm not a numbers person for sure, but it's not like we're not spending the money. We're spending $1 million here for this little bit of trail, and we're spending $1 million here to do this. So to this brain and simplistic, it's not like we're not spending the money, we don't have the money. It's that we are not allocating the money that way. So I agree with you, Mayor. I don't want to raise the mill, but the money's being spent. It's being spent here, there, everywhere, and not necessarily on our people. And I do thank you for that. And it is heavy lifting, and it's a lot to do. But I don't personally think that it's not for lack of the funds being there.
Sure.
It's the way they're being allocated. And I think our people are key.
Yes, employees are, it's a cheesy way of saying it, but employees are your biggest asset. And we can't do the things we do unless we have the employees to do them. We know that he goes crazy because he gets behind in projects because we're down 3 concrete crew members and they work harder and they pay overtime, and she can't do park projects because and we have to pay overtime for public works and fire and parks and things of that nature. Those add up, and attrition, and people get work tired.
Yeah,
and
that puts
so on and so
extra
forth.
stress on the people that are still here too, so, yeah.
And we're reaching a point where we're having an aged workforce, and people are coming eligible for retirement, and they're saying, I'm done with this stuff, I don't want to work harder, I want to work somewhere else, and I can go work at Home Depot for $18 an hour, and beef is fine.
Right.
Ms. Phillip?
I'd like to go ahead and move to approve the proposed adjustments to maintenance staff for the agenda item.
Second.
And do we need a motion to direct Mr. Sanders to look at a holistic approach? Is that the?
I think at this point, it would be much better to wait till we have a new city administrator, which is going to be coming up shortly. So
Okay.
I would recommend waiting. We
All
have a
right.
motion from Ms. Phyllis, second from Mr. Eseltine, I believe. Any further discussion on this? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Appreciate that. We have no old business. We have one item under new business. We're going to do it before 11 p.m.
Oh, my God.
And this is reminding you all that we have holiday lighting at 6 p.m. on Monday, the 21st. So the motion needs to be to schedule the governing body meeting on Monday, November 21st, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. And Ms. Philla, did you make that motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Phyllis, second from Mr. Sipple. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously, and thank you all for staying till 11 o'clock. We are
When's the
adjourned.
holiday lighting start?
6 p.m.
6.